And I'm going to start recording now anyways.
Recording in progress.
See everyone, make sure everyone's in. Get Jane Kinsella in here. Okay. Hello, everyone. This is Chuck Tirone, Reading's. Hello, everyone. This is Chuck Tirone, Conservation Administrator for the town of Reading, pursuant to state legislation superseding certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, Chapter 30, Section A, Chapter 30A, Section 20, relating to the COVID-19 emergency, the August 9th, 2023 public meeting of the Reading Conservation Commission shall be physically closed to the public to avoid group congregation. The meeting instead shall be held virtually using Zoom. This meeting, please note that this meeting is being recorded. All materials are available at the following link, which I will provide in the chat right now. There you go. And Martha Moore, the commission chair, will facilitate this meeting. Please note that there will be public comment period for each hearing. Each vote will be taken during the meeting will be conducted by roll call vote, and we'll begin with a roll call attendance. Martha, can you please review tonight's agenda and then take attendance of the commission members?
Okay, thank you. Tonight we're going to hear from Andrew McNichol and Mary Benedetto about the MBTA communities planning. And then we have Zero Small Lane and Town Forest Invasive Management on our agenda, and Meadowbrook Access Easement. Then we have Old New Business, Certificate of Compliance for 123 Lila and 10 Plymouth Drive, and discussion of regulations has been continued to August 23rd, as have some of the things I just mentioned. And then we will be approving minutes for 2 previous meetings. And we'll also be discussing things like Town Forest Day and whether to start having our meetings include in person as well as virtual. So that's what's on the agenda today. And let me start with roll call. Please say your full name and present when I call your name. Brian.
Brian Bowe, Vice Chair, present.
Andrew.
Andrew Driven, member, present.
Bill.
Bill McCants, member, present.
Martha Moore, member, chair, present. And we are expecting Walter Talbot to be late. We are looking for Carl Saccone, and we know that Tony Rodolakis is not able to join us tonight. That covers all the members of the commission.
And did you give the time we started?
And we are about to start at 7:07. So the meeting is now called to order, and our first hearing is with Andrew McNichol and Mary Benedetto.
Good evening, all. Thank you very much for having us tonight for a topic that may not be directly related to your work as a committee, but is quite important nonetheless. I'm Community Development Director Andrew McNichol, and Senior Planner Mary Benedetto is also on the call here tonight. I think I've had the pleasure of meeting a handful of you throughout my years in town, but perhaps not all of you. So thanks again for having us. We're here to talk to you about the MBTA Communities Law, what it is, why we're talking about it now, and what the timeline for this project looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and hope that that works. I assume that you can see this, but please let me know if any errors. Thank you. And feel free during this presentation to stop us if you have an immediate question. We're happy to take questions that way or save them for the end, if any. So I'm going to jump right into it. What is the MBTA Communities Law? The law was passed it's a law that was passed at the state level within the last year or so. It's a mandate that requires all 177 cities and towns in the Boston metro area to prove to the state that they have a district that of reasonable size, that they call, where multifamily housing is zoned for by right at a prescribed density, which is 15 units per acre. All towns are working on all municipalities are working on this project in that region. Each one has their own unique requirements based on what type of MBTA service they have and their overall developable land area. So what's on this slide that may be a key takeaway for you and others watching is that Reading is prescribed to zone for a capacity of at least 1,493 units across 43 acres. A good portion of that has to be within the half-mile radius of the train depot located in downtown Reading. But it's important to note that while we do have multiple multifamily districts within that half mile of the depot, none currently comply with the requirements of the MBTA Communities Law, whether that's through density, size, etc. And they don't comply for a variety of reasons in the zoning bylaw. And those reasons come down to mostly minimum lot sizes, other dimensional requirements, and uses allowed in the district as well. So in order to comply, we will have to make changes to our zoning. Reading is in a good and interesting position in that there are multiple ways forward that we can take to comply with this law, which is why we're here to engage with you now, and as well as many other members of the community, because there's a hard deadline to comply, and we have to comply by the end of calendar year 2024. So call it December 2024, we must have compliance. I'm gonna move to the next slide. Just to briefly describe what zoning is, you might be familiar with it, but for those that might not be, zoning itself is the rule book for development in the municipality. It is not construction, it's not the building code, it doesn't mandate that anything will happen. It's really a description of what can be built, where it can be built, and some of the restrictions around that build. So in order to apologies, it describes things like dimensional requirements, parking requirements, open space requirements, and location. So when we look back, zoning is really a rule book for future development and where we see the town going for its future. So by right zoning, which the MBTA Communities Law requires for multifamily housing, means that no special permits, waivers, variances, or other discretionary approvals are required for the multifamily project. It does not mean that a project bypasses public hearing, right? We can still have a site plan review process for these developments if and when zoning is implemented. And on the right side here, you'll see kind of some of the key districts within that half mile, the downtown district. We have some multifamily apartment 40 zoning here, and then other single family neighborhoods that have existed for a long, long period. I will continue on. So the key concept for compliance that's fairly new to many is the term of zoning capacity. Zoning capacity as a concept treats every lot as if it has nothing on it. It does not care really what exists today in town. It looks as every lot as if it were empty and what could maximally be built on that lot. So when you see this example on the screen, if you had a hypothetical zoning bylaw that allowed multifamily housing, and I should have explained this earlier, multifamily housing is 3+ units on a lot. So when you look at this example, you would see a duplex on a lot, but zoning capacity treats it as if it were equal. And if your zoning allowed 4 units, you would be able to count that in the compliance model as your zoning capacity, which is 4, even though 2 presently exist. So that's just a hypothetical example with a good visual that we found and wanted to use. So again, we are required to zone at a capacity of 1,493 units, but there's no mandate that that be built in an X period of time. I will continue on. We wanted to show a representation of what multifamily housing here in Reading looks like, and that comes in a lot of variable forms. Everything on this slide is multifamily housing and located within the half mile of the depot. We know when people think of multifamily housing, a lot of times it jumps to the mid-rise or apartment style complexes that you find downtown and maybe on the outskirts of town. But any lot with those 3 units on it counts as multifamily housing, and there's just a lot of ways to go about that. So we wanted to give what this currently looks like in town and the options that are available to us, because through our survey that we'll get to in a second, and through our engagement that we're planning in the fall, these are the types that we want to look at and find out what is most appropriate and possible for this town to proceed with. So again, we get to choose how we comply, and we get to choose what best fits for Reading, and I want to make that clear. So I'll continue onwards about why we're doing this now. Sorry, I spoke a little past it. So one of the big reasons why is that this is a law, and if the town does not comply with the law, we lose potential grant funding, we could see an impact of funding to our housing authority, and we could face potential lawsuits either from the state and or civil rights activist group that look for fair housing laws. This is a mass general state law, and the town should be aiming to comply in whatever best fit way. On the right side is a bit more of a detail as to the background reasoning of why this law was enacted, and again, why we're doing this. So if you haven't looked for houses or apartments in a long time or recently, you might not know that prices have dramatically increased. Rents have increased over 50% in the last 5 years in the Boston metro region, and incomes really have not jumped that much, probably to no shock to you. The median home price for a single family home in Reading is about $815,000, which is out of reach for even the median household income of $133,000 a year. Reading and Boston are getting increasingly unaffordable, particularly to young people and those looking to downsize, creating a huge amount of intergenerational inequity in the region, and in short means that many generations will not have access to the same housing benefits, like being able to afford live in Reading, that many others have achieved over the history of time. I'm going to continue onwards just to kind of show some graphics here, and we have many of these, which I'll get to in a second, but the law that we're working to comply with is directed at solving this problem, which is the aggregate lack of housing supply in the region. The only way to reverse that trend is to ask all of these many municipalities to confirm that their zoning actually allows the building of new units and multifamily units specifically. Multifamily units have a lot of potential and co-benefits in relation to sustainability, aging in place, first-time home buyers, and other areas of interest that we know Reading residents are very passionate about and have brought up to us many times. So that's what the discussion overall is about, and how we help solve what is this housing crisis or housing shortage. So I will continue onwards to describe our timeline. The timeline for our compliance, again, I mentioned that we have to comply by the end of calendar year 2024, but you'll see on this schedule, we're trying to be a bit more aggressive than this. This timeline that's shown currently ends at the end of this calendar year, because our goal is to try to bring zoning to April 2024 town meeting. And for that to happen, we have to have zoning hearings and amendments in place around the new year time. So currently we're in phase 1 of the engagement. We're letting people know that we're starting this process. such as yourselves and many other boards and committees. We're asking residents for the information we need to be able to craft the zoning changes, and we're asking that in a short survey that is open now that I will share in just a second. Our process is really designed to funnel down all those multiple areas that I told you, multiple ways we can comply, and find the single process that again works best. So we want to take everybody with us. We want to have you join in and on the conversation as both a board and as Reading residents yourselves, so that everybody is coming along with us as we take this to town meeting, and hopefully all, while we don't expect full agreement, that all feel comfortable that this is appropriate to Reading. We're anticipating the iterative process bringing us to that final proposal and reaching compliance well into 2024. So continuing on, we've launched a detailed webpage and we've launched a survey, both located under the planning division on the readingma.gov website. On that page, you'll find key questions to MBTA communities that might be able to help you better understand what this law is and what it means for Reading. And what's not shared on this page too is our housing and demographics page that we worked extremely hard on and have just recently publicized within the last few weeks, and that really gets into the nitty-gritty of the why we're doing this. The housing costs, the demographics, everything is there in what is hopefully easily digestible infographics and text. So I would very much encourage you to check out these web pages. Please take the survey if you have not already, and share it with many others that you find in the community, your friends, your family, your neighbors, employees, whoever that might be. We're not exactly asking for anything specific of you at this time as a board, but just that, again, you please reach out to us, stay in the process if you're interested in this, and we're happy to help you learn as much as possible and hopefully reach an end goal together. So that's what I had for you tonight, and Mary and I are here to answer any questions you might have.
Sure, Andrew, can you, I don't know if we need the screen up anymore.
Yep.
Sure.
Does anybody have questions for Andrew or Mary? Bill?
Yeah, this is really more a question as a Reading resident who happens to live within the half-mile zone. So moved to town the end of August 2017, so almost exactly 6 years ago. In that time, for example, there was a large warehouse structure directly across from the train station facility, which is now, as you know, been converted into what looks like luxury apartments. And there's been a lot of building across the tracks on the other side, and you can see that construction underway. The question is, has this helped? Has it had no effect on what the state is ultimately looking for?
So I think it's helped, that development has helped in other ways that really might not have a data point in this area, in this zoning law to it. It's helped businesses, it's helped the town on tax growth, it's helped multiple areas across the region, but it doesn't, like, for example, our downtown district doesn't comply because zoning changes that we did last year with town meeting and members of the community really have just so coming back to lot sizes, right? Like a good portion of our district, downtown district, doesn't comply with the minimum lot size requirement. And many lots across the entire town don't comply with their zone's minimum lot size requirement. And so that automatically rules those lots out of the compliance tool, and they really get a factor of 0 because you can't build on them. So in essence, our downtown district doesn't comply despite the success and development we've had down there, because the zoning just doesn't really allow the by right development across it right at this time, as the lots are currently configured.
Okay, thank you for that, Andrew. So I just looking at it as any layperson would, you live within the half-mile zone, you see structures going up multiple stories that can house a lot more people. And then you hear from the Community Development Office. That doesn't help. That doesn't satisfy the state at all. Any reasonable layperson is going to be puzzled. What exactly is the state after? If Reading is building up and more people can move in to this area, it seems, again, just devil's advocate, it seems arbitrary. This thing about lot size, you know, I'm just a Reading resident going about my business. I see what's happening in the neighborhood. The state has this proposal. Can you help me understand in layman's terms? Let's take that 4-story structure, which, you know, all those people moved into. Let's put it back as a vacant lot. What was the state expecting to see there that would comply across from the train station?
So,
Take this.
yeah, go ahead.
So I think it's important to remember that this is kind of like a zoning exercise for the state. And it's about trying to confirm that every municipality allows for multifamily zoning. And they had to choose a set of criteria that they felt were appropriate, that they could apply across every city and town in the Boston Metro, right? And so they chose criteria. And then they have to say, well, the only thing we can look at is your zoning. This is where it gets into this like understanding of the concept of zoning capacity, right? Which is that Reading has done a great job of building more housing in the area, exactly the area that they're asking us to talk about. But, right, because of the way that they've constructed the exercise of compliance with them, there's a lot of technicalities, right, that make our zones non-compliant, right? Andrew discussed the minimum lot sizes, right? It comes down to the checklist we have to go through for them in order to say, yes, we do allow by right zoning. We're in an interesting position because there is by right zoning, but it's not exactly what they're looking for. There are other towns that do not allow multifamily at all, right? So we're kind of in the middle of the spectrum, right? There are people who allow a lot by right, big developments, you know, closer to the city. And then there are other towns that have no multifamily zones at all. So we're in this position where it's like, well, you know, to meet the requirements, we need to go through and kind of tweak what we have, maybe come up with some new proposals, find out what people want, and then match what we have to what they're asking us from a compliance perspective.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So the last comment I'll make and then let someone else talk is I think in terms of the day to day, you know, I happen to live on Prescott Street. We all talk to each other. We notice buildings going up in the town center, et cetera, et cetera. And I've tried to convey to you why it can be so confusing when, for example, on Prescott, the closer you get to the station, the more multifamily housing you see of the various types you showed in the photographs, which is very helpful. And you know your jobs. I just think this is going to be one of the challenges, is trying to help people understand. While it looks like, because you get into the technical part of zoning, and that's where most lay people are just going to throw up their hands and say, you're speaking a foreign language. Help me understand, you know,
exactly.
what's my skin in this game as a resident of Reading. But I'll stop there. Thank you.
That is exactly why we started our process with the survey, right? Because we said we don't need anyone in town to try to become an expert on zoning, right? That's not what we're asking anyone to do. What we really need from people is for them to convey to us what types of multifamily housing are the best fit and where, right? Do we want to concentrate all of this in that half-mile area? Do we think smaller triplexes and quads are a better fit for the character of Reading? Do people really like these larger multifamily developments that have come in the downtown area around the train depot, right? And I think that's where we're at right now in the process, is trying to get that feeling from residents of, you tell us what you think is the best fit, and then we will go back and we will present you with some possible changes to zoning and like let you know what that will be like. So we agree. We agree.
No, that's very helpful for the kind of casual conversations you have with your neighbors about this kind of stuff. Thank you.
Hey, Brian, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, I was waiting for Bill to finish. So my question is somewhere in that the law has these tenants, but theoretically a town could satisfy the overarching goals of it, of having multifamily housing near transportation without coalescing it into one district. It should be close enough, but not all in one district. Is there any waiver process or anything that's available?
So there's not a waiver process available. You have to comply outright, but you're right that it doesn't need to be condensed to a single zone or area. There are some dimensional requirements like a minimum 5-acre lot size, contiguous area, and so on that you have to achieve with any pocket of zone that you use, and it also has to meet, the minimum of 15 density units per acre. So there is flexibility in the location of zones and districts, and some of this could be outside of the half mile. So if there was concern of fitting the whole zone in that area, we have other options to us, but we are focused on that half mile area at this point in time to find out what best fits there, because that's the most logical place to comply with the zoning and promote the type of development that I think we'd like to see, which is sustainable, long lasting, and what is hopefully naturally affordable in time.
Okay, so then let's assume that you find an area, a district that can satisfy the needs. Logical assumption is the next step is to figure out how to get those buildings in that district and enough to bump up whatever's there now currently or what is needed to be there. Do you have any thoughts on how that would be accomplished? Not in detail, but even what's the approach?
So, there's a few, we see this, and if this goes towards, a smaller type multifamily unit, we would see that more of a slow growth. You saw downtown, right? It was quite an explosion based on the market that was rising at that time when we enacted those zoning changes. We do see this as potentially a bit more slow growth if you expanded and used certain areas of that. Sorry, go ahead.
Then my point is, whichever kind of building is determined to be the way to go, presumably you're going to have to replace some number of the buildings that are there. If these target kinds of buildings, what thoughts do you have for how you would accomplish that changeover?
So this is just a zoning exercise. It does not mean any buildings will be constructed, which is, I think, the kind of piece of it that's maybe a little hard for people to wrap their heads around. So zoning only impacts future development, right? So anything that's currently existing on any lot, it stays there until the lot changes hands and the new owner wants to develop it in a different way. Everything stays as is. The only thing that changes are the rules for future development.
Okay, so it doesn't actually achieve the goal, it just leaves a possible path open to that goal.
Correct.
All right, then I have one last question.
Mhm.
Somebody else can take up the airwaves. The or else in this seems to be that the town would become unable to access certain funds. Do you have an idea roughly what kind of funds we use currently out of those various pools? I mean, how much money is at stake for real?
Yeah, so to date, so there's a few grants available that would not be available if we don't comply with this law, like the Housing Choice Initiative, which we've used repeatedly for years now. I want to say we're upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars in Housing Choice grant. MapsWorks is a big grant exercise, and we're currently applying now for potential streetscape improvements. Actually, that application was submitted in early June, but those awards are upwards of $800,000 to help promote development and building that the town is doing. Other grant opportunities are looped into that. And then I think what's an important factor is Reading Housing Authority budget, which could be impacted if we do not comply. So they receive state funding out of, I believe it's I don't want to guess on the account, I can find it. But
that's fine. I was trying to get a sense for
the
magnitude, but I'm all set. Back to you guys, back to Martha.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we get in the minutes that Walter Talbot and Tony Radulakis have both joined us now, so we have 6 members of the commission present at this point. Andrew, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks for presenting this to us and trying to get us engaged, because I don't think we'll have much to add depending on how far out you guys reach, because there's not too many wetlands within a half mile of this train, but I am interested in this as a resident and as a planning exercise. I'm looking at the numbers and I'm trying to understand them, and I was hoping you could help me. So I see we currently have what, 10,000 housing units, or 9,952. And they're asking you as planners to zone an additional 1,500. Is that what that 1493 is asking? What is the minimum multifamily unit capacity? I'm just trying to understand what the task is that they're asking you to do.
So it's to zone, yes, almost hypothetically a map. I don't want to, it would almost in essence be like a maximum of development based on the zoning that we do. And that's based on number of units and lot sizes that we allow for and other certain elements. But your guess was correct.
So do you know what the current capacity is if you were to build out with the current zoning is?
It's about 1 unit on every lot within the single family. So we're looking at the data now. I do have some preliminary density numbers and units in some pockets within that half mile. I don't want to get into the detail of them just yet because they're not fully finalized, but it's about a single unit per lot on a majority of the area within the half mile outside of the downtown district.
With the current zone, okay. And then, so the minimum land area is the half mile from the train. What is the developable station area, that 343? That I'm seeing?
That is developable lots. That excludes open space and municipal parcels and protected land. So they calculated that number based on the land area and the use and the parcels themselves.
Okay, so that's within the whole town of Reading. Is this
Yes.
343?
I believe that's correct.
Okay. And then do you have to achieve this with the technicality of a multifamily being 3+ units, or can you try to achieve it with accessory dwelling units?
It's a question we've asked ourselves and are planning to ask more. But to date, we know it as 3+ units on a lot. And our ADUs currently are allowed on single family dwellings. We haven't seen them allowed on 2-family dwellings to date.
Okay, yeah, that's my big push is for ADUs. So
ADUs are a great way to create housing stock and keep
Yeah.
aging in place.
All right, sounds good. Glad you're on top of that. Thank you.
Okay, Chuck has his hand up.
Sure. So thank you, Andrew and Mary. I just think this is great. I really appreciate you coming to the Conservation Commission tonight and engaging us in this process. My question was about how you chose a half mile and the center point of that location, which you said was the depot. And I was wondering how you define the depot, the building itself, or including the parking. So when I'm measuring out a half mile, it's a pretty big area. It goes right down to General Way, to Market Basket. The way I measured it was actually exactly from the building, so it doesn't actually get to past the Market Basket or past Stop and Shop. So I was wondering if this would expand in the future, if it has a possibility of expanding, because there's neighborhoods involved at the outskirts on is it Ash Street, or is it, no, it's Vine Street, up by Vine Street. And what are the proposals for up in that area? But mostly the question is, how'd you choose this area? And
So
can
we
they
did not
expand?
choose the half mile. That was a state mandate that they prescribed to us from the depot area. It's actually a question our GIS team has posed as well of, is that from the center point of the lot? Is that from the outskirts of the boundaries? We haven't gotten a clear answer yet, but I think we have enough info to make it work in these areas. But as to your question of what are the proposals out around Vine Street or other areas, we don't currently yet have any specific proposals. So we're working on it based on what we find through this public feedback process.
Yeah, I thought it was with the Vine Street. I don't know if there's 2 family houses up there, but in my town, there's a couple of, well, actually, there's only one on Mass Ave that was a 2-family house. And it really looks like they turned it into a 3-family house without adding any height to it.
Mhm.
So they took away that roof, and so they got that extra apartment or condo in there. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of unique ways for development to ensue that might not be as visually dramatic to people.
And was the depot our choice, or was that mandated also?
That was mandated. We were originally back and forth if Reading was a bus community or a commuter rail community. We settled on commuter rail community, so now that's our center point.
Yeah, just to clarify that. So every community got a designation based on the type of MBTA service they have. Their requirements vary based on that. And then the compliance deadline also changed. So Reading is designated as a commuter rail community. This year, you'll hear a lot of news about towns that are going to town meeting, approving zoning changes. Everyone who's complying this year is a rapid transit community, just as information. So like they have a different compliance deadline than we do. And then there's also adjacent communities that will be complying after we are. So everyone's moving through the process a little differently.
Were we close to becoming a rapid transit community?
No, we don't have a subway.
Is that?
I think bus service, some
Yeah.
bus service as
Yeah,
well.
I think some
qualified.
bus service can be counted, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, and we do have bus service, but not enough routes or something?
Right, and we don't really, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep,
Okay, and of course, I have some questions.
of course.
I'm imagining that the area that you showed on the map is mostly 1/4 acre zoning now. And so I was kind of calculating if you took 4 1/4 acre lots and put 3 family houses on each one of those, that still is only 12 units per lot, and they're asking for a minimum of 15. I mean, 12 units per acre, they're asking 15 per acre. So you'd have to allow 4 family size houses on a 1/4 acre lot to get your 16 units per acre. I'm just sort of doing the math that way. But then you said something about a minimum 5 acre lot size. So if right now we have all these little 1/4 acre lots, how do you rezone to be a minimum of 5 acres when our acres are now 1/4 acres, when our lots are
Right.
now 1/4 acre?
The zone itself has to be at least 5 acres. The lot sizes for development can vary based on the zoning that we go with, but you're right that, dependent on the units prescribed, you might need a smaller lot size, or if you allow for a bit more units, maybe you can have a higher minimum lot size. So there's a lot, and those are the concepts we're looking at now and working through with the public to see what's appropriate and what they feel is not.
Okay, so if you took a neighborhood of 1/4 acre lots and took 20 of those 1/4 acre lots and lumped them together into this zone and said this zone of 20 1/4 acre lots can be zoned for 4 family housing per lot, that would give us that requirement.
Theoretically,
minimum
yes.
five.
Theory, yes. In theory, yes.
And you'd have to do that in enough places to make up our 43 acres and 1,500 units.
Right, and there's more to it than just the units and lot sizes, like setbacks and parking are going to play a role in this in their tool as well. So in theory, yes, but there's just a bit more nuance to it when we get into the nitty gritty.
Okay.
Oh,
Tony.
Tony has his, Andrew, I was wondering if, before Tony jumps on, do you have a plan that shows the half-mile radius
Yep.
around? Can
Yeah,
you put
let's
that up?
see.
And that's all I wanted to ask.
And Martha, if you had more questions, please feel free, or Tony, whoever.
Nope, that was it. Tony's turn.
A quick question, and I'm sorry if you already answered this. I jumped in late. What's the penalty for non-compliance?
Potential loss of funding, impacts and ineligibility for grant opportunities, and impacts to your housing authority budget as well. And that's what we know to date, as well as the possibility of facing a lawsuit from either the state and or civic rights groups.
So in terms of grants, those are state grants?
Mostly state grants, yes.
Do we know how much you receive annually or every few years from state grants?
So on an annual, it's very varied, but I'd explained earlier, Housing Choice Initiative is a grant we have used a number of times in the past, and we've gotten awards of $50,000 to $200,000 to $80,000. We've currently applied for MassWorks, which we would be ineligible for if we didn't comply, and those awards are upwards of $800,000. So there are some sizable grant opportunities that help the town do the projects that we've been doing over the recent years. And sorry, this was my half-mile radius map, just to let it.
Thank you.
All right.
So on that half-mile radius map, you showed some A40 zoning.
Mm-hmm.
Is that zoning compliant with their density and minimum requirements?
So that zoning currently is not compliant with their requirements, and that's largely, again, comes down to the dimensional requirements of the A40 zone, which has quite a large minimum lot size requirements, low floor area ratio controls, and other prescribed dimensionals. So no, none of those currently comply as they stand today.
Okay, so wait a minute, you said they have a large minimum lot size requirement,
Right.
and that's different from the minimum 5-acre zone size.
Right. That's on the individual parcel level, the minimum lot size requirements that
Okay,
to do new development, you would need a minimum lot size of X size.
and the state wants us to have a smaller minimum lot size?
In theory, yes, that would allow development by right.
Okay,
We did have early technical assistance, and they produced a memo which summarizes like an early analysis of some of those zones that you might be interested in, Martha. A link to that is in our FAQ, and they go through, for example, that A40 district you were just looking at, and they go through and explain, here's a variety of reasons why this zone doesn't currently comply. Here's the current density, and we had already, we had that kind of technical assistance look at a few select zones. I think they looked at it last year, and it's a great resource for trying to kind of like wrap your head around why they don't comply currently. And I would absolutely recommend, if you're interested in digging into the details, it's really, really helpful. And the link to that is in our FAQ on the website.
Yeah, and so just to give some maybe a little local the A40 district to build a multifamily dwelling requires a minimum lot size of 40,000 square feet, which I'd be very few of the lots in A40 actually achieve a $40,000 square foot lot size.
okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else with questions for them before we finish up this part of the meeting? Are there any members of the public here that have questions? You can use the raise hand function within the reactions button at the bottom of your screen.
No one from the public. Yeah.
Andrew,
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Are there, from a conservation point of view, is there anything that has come up that is within our regulation that is making it hard for you guys to increase the zoning that you've seen so far that you're aware of?
To date, no. It's kind of, as you had mentioned, within this half-mile radius, there's not a lot of wetland area. So I think, dependent on where the zones go, there could be other challenges if we were to put zones elsewhere. But in this half mile that we've been looking at to date, no, not a lot of conservation challenges.
Okay,
We do have some areas that are wetland and streams within that,
Mhm.
but
I
they
believe
aren't
down
along-
South Main Street, there's a flood or stream zone. And I don't know the exact title to that, but I can find it.
Yeah, but I'm picturing there's a stream that goes between Perfectos and a 3-story apartment building that we recently approved balcony repairs on. And that would be within this district.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
also one behind McDonald's, I believe, right?
Yeah, now
And the one we went to on Washington Street.
there is on Bolton, there's a couple, it's an open drainage area on Bolton, and there's something on Temple. So there's a lot on Temple, actually.
Yeah,
these would
that's
be
the
considered
place I was
riverfront?
picturing.
None of those would be considered riverfront.
Yeah, and if development were allowed within parcels on those areas, they would still require conservation review.
Okay,
Right, so it's not like a 40B where it would strip out the Reading Wetlands
No,
Protection Bylaw.
nope. And I think the zone I was thinking of is there's a water protection zone C within the downtown in South Main. And a zone A as well, but I'm still learning a bit more about what that means.
Yeah. There might be some riverfront, like I said, it goes into its general way. There might be some riverfront there.
That would be good to know, because then we could, if it does borderline that area where there is a riverfront that has some stringent regulations from our point of view, but we could adjust them so that potentially it wouldn't be an issue. So
Yeah,
that'd
and
be-
then sorry,
No, go ahead, Chuck.
I was gonna say, and then, so kind of main Avon where I guess Perfectos with that stream, you'd want to do stream stats right in that area just to make sure it's not riverfront, because a lot of that watershed is from Pinevale. So it may turn into a river somewhere beyond the mortgage company that that went up where I guess the where's it, across the street from, that's Perfectos, yeah, so across the street from Perfectos,
Okay.
so right in that area.
Noted. I think as we figure out what some of these proposals looks like we'll certainly engage you, Chuck, and potentially the board as well to make sure everything looks right. And there's not a lot of concerns.
and how long will the survey still be open for the public comment?
The survey is open through the end of August. August 31st is our deadline.
Okay, so I will encourage all the members of the commission and anybody else watching this video tonight, and anybody who tunes in later on YouTube and sees this presentation, to please go on the website that was shared with us and fill out the survey.
Thank you, Martha. I second that.
Thank you.
Martha, we're joined by resident. Would you like to ask again if any comments?
Sure, if there's anyone here who has comments, anyone from the public who has comments on the presentation about MBTA zoning, please use the reaction button and use the raise hand function, and we'd be glad to give you a chance to talk. Okay, does
Okay.
not seem to be the case. So maybe we can go on to our next topic, and thank you, Andrew and Mary, for joining us tonight.
Yes,
Thank you
very
guys.
much.
Yes, thank you guys for
Thank you.
having us. And again, we're always here. If you think of any other questions or conversation topics, reach out at any time.
Okay,
Have a good night.
good night all. Okay, so back on the agenda.
Our next item is Zero Small Lane, and I understand that they are not ready to present tonight and would like to continue to August 23rd. So can I have a motion to that effect?
I'll make a motion. This is Andrew to continue Zero Small Lane to our next meeting on August 23rd.
Do I have a second?
This is Brian Bowe. I'll second that.
Thank you, Brian.
And this is
And-
Brian Bowe. I'm in favor.
And who was next on the roll call?
Is it me?
Let's
Uh,
go with Andrew next.
This is Andrew Dribbin. I'm in favor.
Bill,
Bill McCants in favor.
Walter? No sign of Walter. Tony,
Tony Rotalakis in favor.
Martha Moore in favor. Walter, one more chance to vote? Okay, so we've got 501 because Walter is not responding at the moment. Okay. Next one is Town Forest Invasive Management, and my understanding is they will be joining us a little bit later. So can I have a move to continue this hearing to the end of the meeting, and we'll come back to them as they are available to join us?
This is Brian. I'll make a motion to move the town forest invasive management discussion to the end of this meeting.
No, this is Andrew. I'll second that.
Brian Bowe in favor.
Oh, Andrew Dribbin in favor.
Bill McCants in favor.
Tony?
Tony Rotalakis in favor.
Martha Moore in favor. Okay, again, 501, because I still don't see any sign of Walter. Walter, you're still not with us? Okay. It looked like he was having some Zoom issues earlier this evening, flashing in and out, so we'll hope he gets back on board. Meadowbrook access easement, any word on that, Chuck?
No word on the Meadowbrook access at this point. I still feel like it makes sense to keep it on the agenda. Possibly anytime we'll break through whatever's happening and have something to sign. So nothing for tonight, though.
Okay, thank you. So that moves us to old new business. Doesn't require any action on our part tonight. What about 10 Plymouth Drive? I think maybe they're not
The-
here yet.
Yeah. So requests for certificates of compliance are not, you don't need to continue them or take a vote to continue those. And 10 Plymouth Drive has some homework, we gave him two things to do. And he needs to have, fix some erosion, pull out some old erosion control, and then establish some lawn and at least it needs to come in enough for us to believe that it would prevent erosion. So that may be towards the end of the summer into the fall.
So no vote needed on that, and we'll just wait till the grass grows.
Yep.
Okay, it looks like Walter has tried to come back in, so if you can let him in from the waiting room, we may have Walter back with us.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we have a list of follow-ups about, I think they should all be listed as violations. And have we got any news on any of those follow-ups?
Yeah, the only update is there are 3 on Hinsey, and the lowest address number of the 3 can come off. The only issue they had was that pile of debris in the drainage channel behind their house, and that has been cleared by a very nice resident other than them, so they no longer have an issue.
So there'll be 26 Hensley.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it's 26 or 28, but yeah, the lowest one. The other 2 still have their issues.
Okay, so the stream debris has been cleared by a volunteer behind 26 Hensley, so they can be removed from this list.
Right. That actually helps 28 as well, in that that was part of their issue as well. They have a remaining fence encroachment issue.
I think you mean 30 at that point.
Yeah, the one in the middle number, sorry.
26, 30, and 34.
Then it's 30. 30 still has a fence issue.
Okay. And as far as we know, 34 still has a garden shed location issue.
Yeah, I checked it out. It's still there. Unfortunately, the stakes that were put in by the surveyor marking the property boundary have been removed. But it's clear that the shed hasn't moved.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it should be at least 5 feet from the property boundary. So even if the stakes are missing, if it's not 5 feet further back from the stream, it's obvious that it's not moved anywhere.
Right, and there's no cleared additional rectangle.
Right. Okay. Chuck is about to screen share for us. Yep. So we're seeing the stream is the line around the top edge, and the property boundary is shown just inside that garden shed at the third building in from the right.
Yep. And the fence in the next property is the one that also extends.
Oh,
onto
yeah,
Conservation property.
quite a
Yeah.
way onto our land.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
So need maybe some action on those. I mean,
I
is
mean-
that part of the discussion tonight?
I think
I don't
That would be a
know. I
good
think maybe
idea.
that's something we can take offline and not take the whole commission's attention with it. We've been trying to do the enforcement things more or less offline. So other than the update, I don't think we have to go any further unless you think
Yeah.
we should.
But my memory is that it was last summer that we gave the shed owner a year to move their shed.
You are correct.
So if it was last summer, we're almost out of that year or possibly beyond that year. So, and I don't remember what we told the fence owners.
Yeah, I've gone by a number of times and there's been a car in the driveway and I try and look non-threatening, but just nobody has come to the door yet, so I can keep on trying, or we can figure out a plan B or D at this point.
Okay, so Chuck and Brian and I can make a plan without taking up time of the whole commission for that. But yeah, we gave them a limit of time. They need to comply by the end of that time limit.
Right, and we gave them a long time on purpose.
I thought I was being excessively generous, but clearly they have used up all the time we gave them. Okay, any word on the 60 Terrace Park dog fence? Brian, I think you were gonna follow up with the assistant town manager. to
Yeah.
see whether he got any
I
response.
dropped that ball. I'll do that.
Okay,
Matt
Alright.
Cornelis.
Thank you.
okay, and should we work on any of these other violation notices, trying to make progress with any of them?
Wish I had the agenda in front of me. There was one. So. I've
I
gone
can
by
read them
one-
out loud to you if you want.
This-
Chuck, what was the one nearest the high school, not Longfellow?
Yeah, Hanscom, yeah, 126 Hanscom.
So that can probably come off because that address doesn't actually have the problem. It's some other house in the area. I don't know what it is, but that's the one where he said you got the wrong address. I've gone down Bond Street. Are there 2 or 3 on the list for Bond Street?
Just two, 38 and 34.
Okay, that's still fine. 38. It's kind of grandfathered as long as the homeowner is there. 34. I haven't gone onto their property. I only knocked at the door, so I'll do that again.
And then we've got 3 on Oak Ridge and 30 Checusset as well.
Yeah, haven't touched those in a while.
Okay. All right, so we'll, again, offline, maybe we can pick one or two people to follow up with and see if we can shrink this list, because it's been a big list of violations that have made no progress in quite a long time.
I wish Bill had done more.
Yes, with all my spare time after reviewing regulations, it's true.
Exactly.
I apologize.
Okay, well, yeah, Brian took on this task before we recruited him to be vice chair, so he was making a lot of progress until he became vice chair and then got a lot of other tasks added to his burden, so.
At that point, I got fat, dumb, and happy.
Okay, so anything else under old new business, Chuck?
So, let me just see where no, because we're down to our discussion items after that.
Okay, so regulation review and discussion, we decided to wait till next meeting to give us a little more time to review them. So just a reminder to members of the committee to do so. Look over the proposed changes and the original regulations and make sure that we are all able to discuss them at our next meeting. Okay, and then Conservation DPW monthly meeting on September 5th. That feels to me like it's the day after Labor Day.
Yeah, must be.
Okay. Yeah, I should be able to go to that meeting. Anybody else who wants to, more than welcome to have you join us.
I should be able to as well.
Okay,
Although that hasn't always worked out in the past either, but I should be able to.
yeah. Okay. All right. Administrators report.
I think my administrative report for this meeting was going to be Meadowbrook, but unfortunately, we haven't ironed out all the bugs in that. So there's nothing else to talk about. I know we're trying to squeeze or stretch the agenda a little bit here, and I will tell you that Matera Cabin has been suffering severe leaking this entire year, and that we've reached out to the DPW and asked for some additional repairs at Matera. And so gutters are problematic because there's a maintenance side to those, and it was decided not to do that. So what they're going to do is on the porch, they want to put in a gutter and a riprap area. So when water comes off the roofs, it'll drop into this area and it'll be delivered down by the garage, but further out. They wanted to regrade the driveway approaching the walkway down to the entrance to Matera Cabin, and hopefully that will take care of some of the water going in that direction. And they were talking about cutting in 2 grates to accept the water that does come down that hard surface, and it goes right, since it's all ADA, it's all flush from any pathway onto the porch, and water comes right down. And we've already replaced about 8 feet of the decking a couple years back. The post at the beginning of the entrance there that holds up the roof is rotted straight through, and it is going to get repaired soon. So those are the repairs that we've asked for, and Fidel was real happy to help me out and get the attention of the DPW and the facilities. Actually, facilities is not really a problem. DPW is really busy with other things, and so I was told that this is on the list, but we just don't know when, which makes sense to me. But these things keep flooding into the garage and destroying the Trails Committee's tools and prevent them from doing work inside when it's raining and the whole place is damp. So it hasn't been like this in years, And so every time it rains, Kathy Kelly runs down and she's just sending the pictures directly to Fidel, the town manager.
So Chuck, any larger conversation about a separate maintenance budget for the cabin?
No. No, that's falls on deaf ears. I think that it would be great to have a larger budget, but it would also be great to be part of a rotation where it's required. Maybe, it's not a school, it's not a cemetery, those are high, visible areas, but somehow have these areas show up on a list where if there's extra money or extra time, the list of problems that we've presented can't get fixed.
Did that come up in your site visit?
Came up in discussions. Yeah, and I guess it'll be discussed a little bit more, but what's happening with that, I don't know. The answers aren't there yet.
I took a walk around the Terra cabin a few days ago, and it looked to me like the two garage doors face out onto a driveway with retaining walls on either side, and the driveway slopes toward the garage doors. And so it kind of makes sense that the water would be running in under the garage doors. So there may need to be some grading of that driveway to redirect some of the flow out into the backyard rather than into the garage. So,
Sure. Well, it's actually not coming from there, but that's a great idea. I mean, that's all gravel, or it was at one point. Now it's grown in.
mhm.
So it's pretty permeable there. Where it's coming from is the driveway, and it goes down the walkway right to the entrance underneath the deck, and then it seeps into the foundation. And so it's a bigger problem than, like an individual could do with a shovel. This is a someone has to design something, someone has to approve some work, and to dig out that trench and put in the riprap and cut in those grades, it's going to take some time. And that happened on a site walk. I'm not sure if all that work will happen. It probably should happen. Work should happen until this problem's solved, because that's, the Trails Committee, myself leading the crowd. I have to say this because if anyone reads the paper when that other thing's out, so it was me. It was all the volunteers are run by this office with your permission. Most of the work we do is for the Trails Committee. So there's a partnership with the Trails Committee. That volunteer group and the Trails Committee did something like 1,600 feet of trail this year. And about boardwalk, we did about 300 feet of new boardwalk, mostly the Next Step Ministry volunteers. It was just an incredible year. We got Lynetta Lane completed and wood chipped, thanks to Mike Hannaford, just bringing us, truckload after truckload of wood chip. So that was all taken care of. So to not have a base and to feel secure about it, where the batteries can be up and being charged, and you can have projects on the ground in the center, just really cut into some of the productivity that this Trails Committee can do. Now that Next Step Ministry is left, we are going to be doing the rest of our projects this year just with the Trails Committee themselves, all the members. So it's really a problem that needs to be solved. It's unfortunate that most people, maybe the facilities or maybe the DPW think it's just a garage, but this is not just a garage. This is a garage that's been turned into a workshop by the Trails Committee.
And it sounds like the problem stems from when the building was turned into a ADA accessible building for use by the town, and probably did not exist when it was owned by a private owner, because they didn't have a ramp, walkway, funneling water right down the hill into the front of the house.
Yeah, plus, so this was a summer house for the Matera family, and I don't think that water in the garage would have bugged anybody at that point. I mean, it's really just a garage. Maybe they had some stuff up on shelves. But there's, there's things there. There's a pretty good sized generator, that sits on the floor. There's our chop saws and table saws and things like that. No, you're right. I don't know if that created more water, funneled more water to the problem area, but the cabin is, shows some signs of age every now and then, and it needs to be taken care of. I think what was frustrating was these requests had gone in months ago, and we got a lot of rain. So just like every homeowner here in Reading, we sat through all these rainstorms just requesting, some attention. And then finally, when it happened this last time, I think, the committee just decided to reach out to Fidel.
Okay. All right, thank you for letting us know about that. Any other comments or questions on that topic from members of the commission or the public?
I will let you know that identified in the problem list was flashing between the garage roof and the house, and facilities has already gone out and put a brand new copper flashing in that area. And it looks beautiful, more than we needed, but I'm happy to see the work.
Thanks to facilities, we appreciate that.
Not more work than we needed. Copper was more, more,
More
bling.
fancy than we needed?
Yeah, than we needed.
Okay,
We got our bling on now over there at Matera.
okay. Just don't advertise it too loudly to the people who go out and steal copper.
Yeah, they'll probably fall through the roof if they walk up there to get it. So we'll be able to catch them.
All right, we have been invited to help with Town Forest Appreciation Day on September 23rd. And they are planning to have the gathering place at Wood End Schools soccer field there, and would be happy to have us with a booth. So I'm hoping some members of our commission will be able to participate for an hour or two that day, and we can say yes to the Town Forest Committee that we will participate. Do we have any takers? Brian will be there. Okay, Chuck will be there. I think I can be there. Any of the rest of you who can be there for a little bit, we'd be happy to see you.
As far as I can tell, I'll be there.
Okay,
If
I
you can
think
hear
it'd be
me,
useful
Walt
to have
Tucker will
bit-
be there.
okay, Walter, you said you can be there?
Yes.
Great, and yes, we can hear you now. All right. So sounds like we'll have a good turnout, and as we get closer to the date, we can figure out time slots more precisely.
Well, and also, what are we gonna have to, the usual questions, to display, to give away? This time we could have Bill give a lecture on regulations. I'm sure
Oh, yeah, that would be, yeah. I'll get some, I can get some chairs over there.
Well, I think,
chipmunks
Chuck,
will
you
love it.
still have lots of lizard stickers, right?
Yeah, I still have whatever was left over from the last one.
I didn't get
yeah.
anything back.
Ah,
It might be good to get stuff back. So next year,
I was going to, but you're so busy with the trails, I just couldn't get to you.
I was thinking I could use a lizard sticker on my clipboard. So I
Okay.
was,
okay, well, Brian will give you one when we all meet on September 23rd. And
Well,
Sounds
maybe
good.
I'll just
Brian,
bump
you're
it up and talk
responsible
to
for
Sam.
bringing them.
Yeah.
Okay, they were very popular with the kids.
Yeah, and I won't do the laptop because there's no way to get power out there. So we gotta figure out something else to do.
Okay. All right. Well, I'd be happy to bring my children's entertainment tree leaf pictures and animal footprint with an ink pad. I can bring that kind of stuff. Brian, do you still have some of the brochures and postcards and stuff that we had for the last one?
Yeah, I have whatever's left over. I don't have an inventory top of my head, but yeah, there's still that little box full of stuff.
Okay. All right. If you figure out that there's not enough before September 23rd, give Chuck some notice so he can make some extras. But otherwise,
Be
we'll
happy to
go
give
with what
Chuck
you've
more
got.
work, yes.
Okay.
So that's, that reminds me, so it's always tough to get that stuff. Sometimes it's passed out. When you go to a conference, and MACC's fall conference or spring conference, it would be wise to, go in, look at all the exhibits, but to grab whatever you think might work out to hand out to residents here in Reading also.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
or any
like if
conference
they're-
you go to.
If they're giving out those books of invasive plants in Massachusetts, that would be a great one to snag some extra copies of that we can share with our town
That's right.
residents.
And by the way, for sure, Chuck, remember the banner we had?
I do remember it. And I was
Yeah.
thinking that must be with the salamander stickers.
It is, and we're gonna need a replacement because it rained at the last event. So it's waterlogged. Well, the ripple paper after being waterlogged.
Really? We need a new one?
You can look at it and make your own value judgment, but I believe we probably should look at that.
Huh.
Oh, and actually, we had the map there for the conservation lands. That's definitely needs to be, we need to do one of those.
Because it got pretty soggy in the rain.
Yes, it did.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Next one we need to get laminated before we bring it to a outdoor event. We'll see if we can figure out a solution to that. Okay. Next question on the agenda is whether we want to start with in-person meetings. I feel a little bit silly with Chuck saying because of COVID-19 and exposure to germs, and yet many other town committees are now meeting in a hybrid form where they're in person and online. So I want to have a chance to talk about whether we should go back to presence in town hall with a hybrid with an online component. And Chuck, you look like you had something to say.
I was just going to add a little bit more to the banner discussion. If it is gone, we could design a new one. I'll bring a template with some pricing to the next meeting, and you could vote to allow me to order it. So that's all I wanted to say.
No, sorry. Okay. Any thoughts on in-person hybrid meetings? Bill?
Yes. So, first of all, I thought the state had authorized an extension of like 2 years. Are you saying that that extension was conditioned upon Chuck's statement being made each time? That is to say, it was because that could be the case. I just didn't know that was the case. So that's my first question.
I don't know that it's conditioned on that. That's just what we've been saying every time. But
Okay.
I do know that we are allowed to continue to meet exclusively online. But
Yeah.
I'm wondering whether we might want to, starting at the beginning of the fall school year season, have at least some of us show up in person at town hall.
Yeah.
I have another question, but Chuck, did you have something you wanted to?
Yeah, I did research that information that's on there. I think that's the current regulations that I'm citing.
Yeah.
And I think we could just read that for 2 years and until it's over. I mean, that's what I thought.
Yeah,
But I mean, other places are doing hybrid. That's also true. And
so that's my second question. Hybrid means what? Obviously, we have trouble I mean, we meaning the commission before I joined, after I've joined, we have not successfully gotten to 7 members. I'm not going to bring up the Carl issue this time, but I certainly will in the future, because the MACC says if you have a non-participating member for a long period of time, at a minimum, you should make sure the appointing authority knows, so that, you know, they can decide if they want to do something about it. But putting that aside, hybrid means there's technology that members of the commission who can't be there in person can still participate. My practical reason for asking that is, when I was in the commission in Belmont, before this was available, we lost a very valuable member of the commission because he happened to have been tapped to go to the national headquarters of Nature Conservancy in Washington, D.C. for 3 months. He was happy to join meetings remotely. And at that time you couldn't. So we lost that commissioner. And I'm thinking, you know, we want to keep as many of us on the commission as possible. We're all committed. If hybrid means that, like, for example, myself, and I'm sure others could speak the same way, if work happens to take me out of town, my intention was always, well, I can still join because I can join remotely. And so that was something else I wanted to clarify.
Mhm.
So could you just explain how that technology works in town hall that enables that hybrid participation with people there in person?
Yes, we have a wonderful machine that has a camera that turns back and forth and looks at whoever is speaking and has them be on the screen from the people sitting around the select board table. But then the big flat screen TV on the wall has other people who have zoomed in, who are present in the meeting, but they are in their little Zoom box on the wall. And so if you watch a town forest committee meeting or a select board meeting, you can see that in action. And I would not choose to go back to meeting in the select board room unless we knew that members of our commission could zoom in from wherever they happen to be. If their work takes them elsewhere, I'd like them to still be able to participate. But if those of us who are in town could actually be in person at the town hall, and then people who want to zoom in could still zoom in. And I think a lot of the applicants and their employees might prefer to zoom in, because somebody like Jack Sullivan could possibly zoom into more than one meeting from his house without having to be in present at our meeting and therefore miss a meeting in Bedford.
Great. This is reassuring. One last question, purely practical. Parking. Can one assume that it's not it's not problematic to, say, park at the town hall at 6:45 to get to a 7 o'clock meeting? That may sound strange, but I assure you, in Belmont, that was not straightforward.
So parking is, there's a lot of parking here after hours, and
Okay.
it's, our Wednesday night meetings are, an hour and a half after the town hall closes, so there's never an issue. I just wanted to maybe help you understand how the technology works, and I'll just simply say, we have a screen, and in that screen, we invite the Zoom screen into it. So we can present projects, but we're inviting the Zoom screen also. So everyone would be just like we are now, set aside. And so all that discussion all happens. It's pretty seamless. I mean, I'm at town hall right now. I mean, some of us could be at town hall. It's just more relaxing because I don't have to wear these, and we would be either in the select board room or the conference room.
Yep. Yeah, just to be clear, I have no objection to being in person when I can be, but I'll tell you frankly that if it had to be in person all the time, I could see my work being such that I don't want to screw up the quorum, just because I happen to be somewhere else where I could come in remotely. That was really where my concern was coming from. And you've addressed that. So thank you.
Andrew, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm for SWEC, we've been meeting at the town hall, and it's hybrid, and it works. It definitely encourages you to be in there, but I really appreciate the flexibility. I could technically parent. So if my wife is not around, my kids are old enough that I could trust them to do their thing, but so hybrid is my preference, so that I do enjoy being able to zoom in. It makes my life a lot easier.
Okay. All right, but you'd be okay with hybrid, not just fully online?
That's fine. I mean, so for the SWAC meetings, the online folks do get a little bit, it works. It's a little different, but yeah, I'm fine with that.
What do they get? They get a little more attention. It's
No, they get-
easier to get someone's attention if you can have eye contact and all that, right?
If you're in person.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's all about the chair.
Okay, I will keep that in mind, that I need to make sure to give the Zoomers equal time. Walter, you've got your hand up.
Perhaps my greatest hypocrisy is I spent 33 years of my life traveling and trying to get face to meet people. And now at my age and hearing people still getting COVID, etc., I'm all in favor of the safety factor of being online. My negative would be for other people. All those displays and maps and drawings and diagrams obviously take a little bit of effort. So that's in the old days, we would just put a map on a table and everybody stand around it. So I don't know if you folks who are developing all those pictures and whatever consider that to be an extra pain in the ass or not. But I would vote, let's keep it remote or hybrid, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, Walter, that's a different that's a different bucket. That's called the go paperless bucket, and that's why we have the PDFs. We won't change that. It's actually great to send out all that information to the commission and only get 2 copies of most applications, and it's easy to manage here in the office. So that's no issues. No, we want to have presentations on the screen and bring up different information all on the screen and try to do the best presentation we can and bring that participation from like residents that are zooming in. They should see what we see and they should hear what we hear. So I can guarantee that we will have the plans, but the microphones, I'm not so sure about. I've heard they're constantly working on them.
Well, thank you for all the efforts you make to do those displays.
All right.
So do we have any, it sounds like everyone is willing to have it become hybrid rather than fully remote. But a lot of people are expressing lack of desire to actually be there in person. So if we went to hybrid, would Chuck and I be the only ones in town hall, or would some other people also show up in town hall?
I would show up at least periodically. There would be times I need to be here to answer requests from my dog or my wife, whichever. But I would be there in person sometimes.
I will echo what Brian said. I would be there in person sometimes, and I would be remote other times. And that's the best I can offer. With that flexibility, I'd be able to stay on the commission, which I definitely want to do.
Okay.
And I'll let you know that I'll speak for the occasional resident that tells me I'd prefer to come in and tell you my story. So I think there's at least a few votes from, residents of Reading that would want us to have hybrid availability.
Mm-hmm. Especially there have been occasionally somebody who thought we were at town hall, showed up in person by bicycle and then had to go home again because we were only on Zoom. So that's, you know, it's important to have people know exactly where to find us when they're coming to the meetings. Walter.
I would come to the meetings, as Brian said, occasionally, but I'd be the one in the N95.
That would be fine. Absolutely. That was what we did when we were briefly hybrid at one point when it seemed like COVID was going down. And we also carefully sat every other seat around our horseshoe so that we had our 3 feet distance between us. And I would encourage people to do that again. And it sounds like we would have a
Yep.
small enough number of commission members that we could easily be spread out around the horseshoe.
All right, so at this point, I just want to remind the commission that this is the time when Bill Sullivan said he would get back to us. So let's, if we're done with this, the only other question is September 13th. Is that the start date? Are people okay with that? I'm going to check and make sure I have September 13th correct, which I do. Is everyone okay with September 13th being our first hybrid meeting? Sounds like great. No vote needed. We're on to, there's no bills to discuss, but there are minutes.
Right. Did everybody have a chance to read the July 12th minutes? I had one issue is that the list at the top did not list that Carl Ciccone was not present. Apparently the minutes taker doesn't know Carl Ciccone is a member of the commission or did not know that he had to be listed on there. So we need to add members not present, Carl. And then I just couldn't remember in the minutes that were written up, at the beginning, we had 0 Small Lane and 16 Beverly. And we had a smaller number of people voting on that. We had 500 for those 2 votes. And then after that, it went up to 600. So does anybody remember who came in late to that meeting or for some other reason was not voting on those first 2 events?
I wish Tony was here because I think it was Tony. but I
Tony
don't
will,
think-
oh, sorry, Tony is coming back when we start talking about the invasive, so we could save that.
Okay.
Okay, because I know he commented on 18 Whittier, which is probably why we see the 6-0, but I think he left after that. That's what I'm not sure about.
Yeah, because at the end, we were back down to 500.
Yeah, I think Tony was on vacation and he was in his car and then he left.
Okay, so we might need to make a note somewhere in those minutes that it was Tony who was not available for the first 2 votes and the last vote.
Okay,
And that's the only issues I had with that one. Did anybody else have any corrections or changes that you think need to be made to those minutes?
No.
Okay, can we have a motion to accept the July 12th minutes?
This is Bill McCann. I make a motion that we accept the July 12th, 2023 minutes.
This is Andrew. I'll second that.
And I would please make a friendly amendment to that to say as amended.
As amended.
Thank you. Okay. Who starts the voting? Brian?
Brian Bowe in favor.
Andrew Gibbon in favor.
Bill McCann in favor.
Walter Talbot in favor.
Martha Moore in favor. Okay, so that's 500. And then July 26th minutes. Did everybody have a chance to read those? Bill?
Yes. Several comments. Members not present, it lists some presenters, Jeb, Jessica, and Scott, so that should go under others present. And Carl should be listed under members not present. Looking at page 3.
Hold on just a second. I want to add one more correction. It doesn't list Chuck at all. So we need to get Chuck listed as being present for that meeting.
Excellent point, Martha.
Okay, now you can go on to page 3.
Okay, on page 3, several things. In item B, which is the second paragraph at the top, it says, Mr. McCants also proposed addition language added. That should be changed to Mr. McCants also proposed additional language and strike added. The next sentence says, the research of somewhat 40 surrounding municipalities should be changed to say the research of 40 other municipalities. The research of 40 other municipalities. And then going down to the middle of the page where you see RWPR section 3D4, third line, it says may be referred to as no disturb zone. That should be changed to say no structure zone.
Ooh, very important.
Yep. And those were the ones that jumped out at me.
I had one other correction for 31 Wilson. I made a note. It said something about Andrew sustaining, and I think it really should have said Andrew abstained for the vote on 31 Wilson.
Yeah. And I entered the meeting at that point, so I don't know where that goes into the meeting, the minutes.
Mhm. Is that why you abstained? Is because you hadn't been there for the discussion?
Yes.
Ah, okay. I couldn't remember that. So we had 4-0-0 to close, and then Andrew abstained. That was my notes about that one. Okay, so Chuck, can you get a note down that Andrew arrived late for that discussion?
Yeah, so I was just thinking I would just say that Andrew Dribbin came to the meeting during the 31 Wilson Ave and was sustained for the vote.
How about abstained from the vote?
Okay, I guess I'll do that.
Thank you. Okay. Any other corrections?
That was the only one I noted.
Okay, I hear no corrections. So can I have a motion to accept the minutes as amended?
This is Bill McCants. I make a motion to accept the minutes for July 26, 2023 as amended.
Okay,
This is Andrew. I'll second that. As amended.
Favor?
Andrew Dribbin in favor.
Bill McCants in favor.
Walter Talbot in favor.
Martha Moore in favor. So that's 5-0-0 for that.
I
Okay.
sustain those votes.
All right. We have a member of the public here who has been listening all evening, but has not had a chance to speak. Diane, if you have anything you particularly came for, we'd love to hear from you. You can unmute if Chuck gives you permission.
wait a minute, I'm just sending Chris Cole because he's let me know that the bylaw committee is taking longer than we thought. So I've asked him to present the application because I don't know what we're going to do after,
Mhm.
after we finish up here.
Right. Okay. So Chuck, have you given Diane permission to speak?
Yes,
if
I
she
have.
wants to?
Yep.
Okay, Diane, if you want to speak, you can unmute. And if you just want to continue to listen, that's fine too. Okay, so so what you're saying, Chuck, is that Town Forest Committee is currently at the bylaw meeting, and that's why they aren't here to present about invasive species management.
That's right.
Okay, and Chris Cole is also at the bylaw meeting, or We're just asking him to sub in for Bill.
He just sent me an email and I replied to the email and he hasn't replied back, but he's just saying, where you at with your meeting?
Okay,
So a lot of that was offline, but sure. I am waiting for him to reply.
okay. Does any other members of the commission have anything that we need to talk about that can be discussed tonight as part of our meeting while we wait to hear back from Chris Cole or Bill Sullivan? Bill,
Yeah, just very briefly, I alluded to it before. I'm very grateful for Carl's service. I've been at meetings where he's attended. I don't want to, raise the issue, except to say that I would suggest, per MACC guidance, it would be appropriate to bring to the attention of the appointing authority, the select board, that for whatever reason, it's been a long time since he's been able to attend. And the select board can do with that information what it chooses. But then we've done what the MACC suggests we do, and we can leave it at that. Thank you.
all right, thank you for bringing that up. I keep hoping he'll be able to join us more frequently. Yeah, I think before talking to the select board, I would want to go back and look through our minutes and figure out when the last meeting was that he did attend, so that we have an accurate piece of information about that.
Yeah, and I want to make clear, I'm in no way trying to make trouble for Carl or the commission. I just feel MACC does specifically address this, and it seems enough time has passed, it might just be a good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, and I have to agree. I really like Carl. I think he's helped us a lot. But I think even Carl would recognize that he made some promises about when he could be available and when his schedule is lighter, and which he wasn't able to keep. So this would certainly be different if we had someone as an associate member waiting to become a member. But I want to remind the commission that this is not our decision what to do. And we do have to let the select board know that, this has come up in an email, and then it's up to them to choose, because the commission can't vote off members. That's not within our purview.
Mhm.
And I thank you, Chuck, and I want to make it clear, it was not at all my intention to suggest we should take such an action. And it really was just to suggest that informational piece. But thank you. And I just want to state that for the record. I don't want to give Carl especially the wrong idea. Thanks.
Right. And I understand that the select board is probably not all reading our minutes carefully and looking to see who's listed as not present. And therefore, they would not necessarily know that we don't have a full commission actively coming to every meeting. They look at it and say, okay, we gave you Walter and Tony, therefore you've got 7 members. We don't have to worry about you. Let's go fill some other commissions.
So I know it's Jackie McCarthy. I'm not sure the other person. Is it it's not Carlo who's on the VASC. Is it Chris Haley? Jackie and Chris?
It was this time. It was Chris and Jackie.
Okay. We have Jane Kinsella here. I'm going to let Jane in. Maybe we're going to get started soon. Bill I might have said this, Bill is switching meetings now. He's going to join us and present his project.
Oh, good.
Well, no, here's Chris Cole. So I'm just going to make them co-hosts because they're co-hosts, so then they can control what they want to. And so Bill should be in soon.
And who's going to let Tony know that we are now talking?
I am.
on the phone?
He told me to send him a text.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So Bill should only be a couple of minutes. He was trying to get out of the other thing. They started asking him a question, but they're winding down, so.
Thank you all for coming. And we had put the Town Forest Committee item at the end of our agenda, and we have now finished all of our other business, so we can take up the invasive management whenever we are ready to do so.
Yeah, just waiting for Bill Sullivan, who's the chair of the Town Forest Committee.
And Chuck, while we're waiting, I just wanted to thank you for drawing our attention to that lengthy document, the 5-year plan for invasives. That was, I thought, just extremely useful.
You're talking about the Camp
welcome.
Curtis Guild document?
Yep, yep.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed when they came in. BSC does a good job. Plus, I think it was Matt Byrne was Martha Moore's past student. Did I have that right? I keep saying I put him in your classroom and he's not. He was just there when you were there.
Was a
I'm not sure.
past colleague. He worked at Reading High School when I worked at Reading High School, and he was a student when I was teaching at Reading High School. I don't know for sure he was my student,
Okay.
but he wrote a book on vernal pool organisms along with Leo Kenny and their field bio class.
And Leo's another science teacher at Reading High.
He's long since retired.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, he was the founder of the Vernal Pool Association, which started at Reading High School with students taking the field bio class. And they are the reason why there is a lot of certified vernal pools in Reading and surrounding towns, because that was what his students did for their learning by real problems project, was to go out and certify vernal pools when that was first a thing you could do back in the 90s.
Martha, do you also have Tony's cell phone? I didn't have it, so I took down his number and sent that, but I haven't received a response.
Okay, let's see if I have him in my texts or only by email.
I think I got it right. 9. Yeah. Should be it. Oh,
I
Bill
only
Sullivan's
have
here.
emails for Tony.
You could send him an email quick. Maybe he's going to get that too.
Well,
I should call him. Let's see what happens. Okay, we're all good. He's getting on. If Bill could just wait a minute until he gets on, that would be great. Bill, I'm going to make you co-host. Could you just wait a minute before you start your presentation? We're waiting for one more member.
Okay, sorry about that. Really sorry.
Yeah. Hopefully you got what you wanted with the bylaw committee. It's a process. There's more meetings
had-
coming.
I had 2 minutes.
Really? Oh, jeez.
I figured the thing before, it seemed like it should be pretty straightforward, but it was not. So,
And like I said, sure you heard me, but I'll just repeat it, that we're waiting for one of our members. I had just given him a call. He said he would jump right on.
okay, all right.
So Bill, were you there talking about unleashed dogs at the bylaw committee?
I had hoped to, yes. There's been, a draft prepared. And so that would, limit the number of dogs off leash to 2 per handler in response to a bunch of complaints. So
Did they not discuss it tonight after all?
I had, they were talking about something else for an hour and 10 minutes. So I just had about, say, literally not 5 minutes to give them a quick description. And so we'll have to figure something else out.
Okay, Tony Rodolakis, I hope I got that right, has joined the meeting. And you can start, Bill, if you want to start your presentation. Maybe you can get back to the bylaw committee.
Hey, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I'm Bill Sullivan, Chair of the Town Forest Committee. Some of you have a sense of the subject because we've talked about it a number of times before, but this is it's really important, we feel, to the health of the town forest. And so thank you for this opportunity to discuss the request for determination of applicability that was prepared by DPW with some assistance from us. So first, invasive plants in the town forest, there's a lot of them: buckthorn, Japanese knotweed, tree heaven. And so we really are trying to be very aggressive and trying to get our arms around this, because if we don't do it now, then it's going to be out of control. So to date, we've done, we've had some work done by volunteers, and we had one very limited contract in 2022 for some buckthorn control. Parterre Ecological, I'm not sure if you all are familiar with them. I think they've done some work. I know they've done work for us elsewhere in town. We've had them prepare an an invasive plant management plan. Reason being is we needed to get our arms around, where the biggest problems lie. And so they did a survey of the town forest. They've kind of broken it up into 2 distinct areas. There was the main the main fire roads that you see here. And the way they've got it divided up is that there are different levels of pressure: heavy, moderate, and light. And those are kind of color coded. So the darker are the heavy, and then the lightest are the light invasive pressure. The other areas that they classified were the various trails. And so, likewise, they're shown in a similar manner in terms of the light, moderate, and heavy invasion. So because of the magnitude of the problem we've got here, this is not something that we can really handle with volunteers as much as we would like to. Town meeting approved some of the ARPA funds for us for both dead tree removal, which we've spoken about in the past, and also for invasive plant control. And so this phase 2 would focus on the blaze trails and the spurs that were on that previous plan. Reason being is there's just too much to try to do it all for the money that we've got left. And so the level of effort that would be required for the Blaze Trails and Spurs is about equivalent to the money that we've got left. So that's why we're focusing on that. And then going forward, we'll get to the rest of it as money becomes available. So the scope of this contract would be bid by DPW, and it would be focused on buckthorn, which is really the primary invasive plant. And it's the one that we can deal with in this time of year, the September, October, November timeframe. And again, the density, as I mentioned before, was the heavy, moderate, and light. There was 3.8 of heavy, 3.2 acres of moderate, and 4.9 of the light. And it's a total of 11.9 acres. So these are requirements that would be in the contract documents, in the scope of work. And so if it's less than an inch in diameter, then they'd be pulled out. If it's more than an inch, it would be cut and dabbed with a triclopyr-based herbicide on the cut stumps. Must be done in accordance with the manufacturing requirements. They certainly would have to require to any of your requirements that would come out, hopefully as a result of this RDA, and also the Mass Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program. There must be a licensed herbicide applicator in the state and abide by the herbicide laws in the state. And these last two were the requirements from Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program, which was, it'll be done on foot, so no heavy equipment because it is priority habitat, the town forest is, and also the way that the material is stockpiled so that it doesn't interfere with wildlife. The other part of not the work to be bid, but that National Heritage, Mass Fish and Wildlife wanted to be included in their permit application, and I would think it would make sense to include in the RDA, was the replanting of the areas, and they're kind of like orange circles. See the area 7 down by Meadowbrook Golf Club, and then area 10 up by Great Island. So those are a couple of areas that we've had cleared in the last go around of the dead tree removal, and we want to replant those so that we can get native plants in there, and which would then crowd out the invasives. Okay, so we've got, as I mentioned, we applied to Mass Fish and Wildlife. We got their approval, their authorization for 5 years, and the 2 conditions that I mentioned that are already in the scope of work, or the work being done on foot, and then the way that the stockpile is to be handled. That we've already got that in the scope, so that will be part of the bid document. So the RDA that has been put together by DPW, this is the kind of the first really big piece of the invasive plant control. So we request a negative determination on this, and that would allow us to move forward, because our goal is to get this out to bid in the next couple of weeks, so that we could then get the contractor on board, so we can get this work done during the window that this work must be done, because you can't do this work in January. So we really want to get this done in, say late September, October timeframe. And again, the focus would just be on this is the same figure that I showed previously that shows the Blaze Trails and Spurs, so that we can attack the invasives in this area. And again, while the replanting in area 7 and 10 are not part of the work that's going to be bid, under this next contract, it is work that will be ongoing. Some of it in area 10, the plan is to do that by the Scouts are going to do area 10 in the fall, and part of area 7 is going to be done, shortly too, actually by Parterre. For those who have been out to see area 7, it's the steepest part by the gas line, fairly close to Meadowbrook, and so we want to make sure that we get that stabilized, that slope stabilized. So that's why we've got Parterre is under contract to do that planting. The other thing I just wanted to bring up for consideration, not necessarily a decision at this point, but just to kind of float this idea that, do you remember when we had a discussion early on, might all of this invasive control work be done under the town-wide trails permit? It does say already that invasive plant control can be done, but it doesn't specifically allow the application of cut and dab herbicides. So that might be something to avoid, say, since this is going to be an ongoing effort, instead of DPW preparing an RDA and then you all reviewing it each time we go through one of these. Just the thought, might it make sense to add the ability to do this this invasive plant control under the trails permit by modifying the trails permit to incorporate it? Well, obviously we'd still go through the notification process, but in terms of coming and requesting your approval to do this. So that's just a thought. I don't want to sidetrack necessarily the most important thing. The most important thing is from our standpoint is to get the approval to move this forward with the work as shown on this drawing, which is the phase 2 invasive plant management, because that we need to get that out to bid as soon as we can. The other is maybe I'm just planting a seed for maybe future discussion. So thank you for your, this is the Town Forest Committee, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Anybody on the commission with questions?
Tony has his hands up.
Okay.
Hi, Bill, thank you for the presentation. I think this is an important project, and certainly the benefits go without really much need for discussion. But could you scroll back to the slide that talks about the different methods that you're going to use based on the plant and the diameter?
And this was when Parterre did their plan, it included, and I could actually I have it on my laptop here. I could pull it up if you'd like to see it. But the plan that has the drawings, it also provided the recommended treatment methods, not just for buckthorn, but for the Japanese knotweed and among a number of other things that are not part of this RDA. So this 1 inch was their recommendation. This is what is done in the business right now, is that because anything larger than 1 inch, it gets almost impossible to pull. I mean, depending on the size of it. That's why there's that 1 inch distinction.
Okay, so when pulling out the buckthorn, and I've been on a couple of crews that have volunteered in the town forest in the past, and the folks in the town forest have drilled it into me that the buckthorn isn't good there, and now whenever I see it, I get sidetracked on my hikes and I start pulling it.
Thank you.
But it's pretty tough to do, and a lot of times some of the roots, no matter how hard you try and pull, they get cut off and they stay in the ground. What's the for lack of a better term, the recidivism rate of buckthorn with root threads that get stuck? Is it likely that they're gonna grow back in the next year, the next 2 years?
So that's an important consideration, and I certainly don't want to give the impression that once we go through and do all this, that these areas will remain buckthorn free forever. This is going to be an ongoing effort all the way through, and there will be some small ones that we don't even see when they're doing this, that are in the seed bank. And so there will be an element of that. I mean, there will be some need to come back, periodically. I don't know, maybe every, who knows how many, but by that point, that we will have reduced the load, the number, the density in the town forest by such an extent that it makes it relatively easier with volunteers to go in and pull out the little ones. The little ones come out very, very easily. So if they're in the seed bank,
Right, but
we'll,
but
you
but the
know,
1 inchers seem to be pretty thick, and if we're leaving a lot of root mass in there, they're going to grow back pretty quickly.
I see what you're
And
saying.
so
Yeah, well,
right. So I'm wondering if there's any value in reducing the threshold for the herbicide application.
so in the discussions that I've had with Parterre, there's a big difference between the way buckthorn behaves and the way that Japanese knotweed behaves. You can apply all kinds of, you know, herbicides to a Japanese knotweed, and that will keep coming back. But with buckthorn, the way Miles Connors described it, he said, buckthorn like to die. And what he meant was that the small ones, the root is fairly shallow and it comes out fairly easily. But the bigger ones, when you apply the herbicide, it's highly effective to killing the whole plant.
Right. No,
As
I
opposed- I say
understand
opposed
that.
to others.
I understand that. But if we're looking for a higher success, I'm just wondering if it might be more effective to apply the herbicide on 1/2 inch diameter, you know, as a way of making sure that we're really
Oh, I
killing,
see what you're saying.
right, the you know, really getting down into the roots. My next question is, how was the herbicide triclopyr selected over a glyphosate based, like a
Because-
rodeo or a Roundup herbicide?
Yep, because the triclopyr is more effective on woody type of plants. So that was their recommendation.
Okay. What size crews
can
would
we-
be doing the work?
That's kind of gets into the, I don't really know, to be honest. I mean, I think that would be, you know, that kind of gets into the means and methods that, you know, it would probably depend in part on the, you know, it's all about person days, right? And so
Right.
if they had 5 people, they could do it in X number of days. If they had 10, they would cut that in half. So I
Right.
don't really know the answer to that question.
My caution would be that when you start getting large crews there, there tends to be a lot of impact to the vegetation just from people walking around. And I understand that they'll probably, since they're working along the trails, that they'll be spending most of the time probably on the trails. But I think if the crews that get dispatched are fairly large and there's a lot of people walking around, they could compact the soil a little bit and they could trample on some of the undergrowth. So if there's a way to get these removed with minimizing the impact to some of the other native plant species that could be in the understory, that if there's something they could do in their methods to mitigate against that type of an impact, I'd be
Okay,
candid
I'd be
about it.
happy to speak with Parterre on that and see if they had some recommendations, if that would be okay.
Okay.
And getting back to the 1/2 inch,
Yes.
I'd be happy to speak with them too about that. And see what they think, why it is that they recommended the 1 inch. But if they say 1/2 inch or you know, is as good as 1 inch, then we can certainly, if they think that there may be some advantages to, you know, lowering that from 1 inch, that threshold from 1 inch to a 1/2 inch, then we can certainly make that change.
I mean, it seems to me if we're going through this effort and we have a limited budget, we'd really want to optimize or maximize the return that we're getting and prevent the need of having to go back even in a couple of years when there are a lot of other spots in the forest that are infested with invasive plants. Do you know if any of the crews will have a botanist or a principal wetland, a PWS, a professional wetland scientist who would be able to identify more sensitive species, to identify any of the state listed species or have access to those lists in case they see them, they'll be able to to note those occurrences and avoid pulling them or spraying them by accident?
Yeah, I know that Parterre, especially with Miles Connors, is that type of person. And I know that he is involved with, at least getting the field work underway. And so I can speak to him about, briefing his people just to make
Yeah,
sure that,
or even just performing a survey himself, clearing the area just to confirm that there aren't any rare or endangered or threatened plants that maybe haven't been recorded with natural heritage yet.
okay.
So
All right,
Tony,
will
can I
speak with him
just
about that.
add something? They're not doing backpack spraying. This is pull or cut and dab.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sure you might have misspoke, but I just wanted to make sure that people listening understand. So
That's a good point, Chuck. Thank you.
non-targeted plants will probably not die off.
Absolutely.
Thank you for answering my questions.
My pleasure. Brian?
Yeah, hi.
Oh, sorry, Martha. Is that Martha? Is that your job? I'm sorry if I
It's
jumped the
fine.
gun.
It's fine. I was taking notes, so I wasn't looking or whose hand was up. So thank you, Bill, for
Okay.
moving things along.
You can be Martha too for this conversation. So what are your plans for dealing with weather considerations?
The way that
what do you think
they've
is going
spoken
on?
about it is that, certainly you wouldn't do this in a rainstorm. So they realize that it's weather dependent.
But you also probably wouldn't do it if you expected a rainstorm upcoming relatively soon. Right, because then it still could wash off excess material.
I'm sorry. I didn't get all of that, Brian.
It's one thing to say they won't do it while it's actually raining, but what about a situation where the weather guessers are saying it's going to rain? In the next day, in the next 2 days.
Yeah, no, that's a very fair point.
Okay.
So no application. Well, they could certainly do the pulling, but they couldn't do cut and dab.
Yeah, that's a fair point. What thoughts do you have in the areas that they clear? It's one thing to come back for follow-up the next year or whatever. I agree that's going to be necessary. But what do you plan to do in the meantime to minimize new invasives or whatever coming into an area that you just cleared?
So that that's kind of goes to you're talking about if I didn't get all you said, but I think what you were getting at was the areas that we just did the red pine removal.
No, sorry, the areas where you pull buckthorn, some of these buckthorn are in big thickets. So when they cut those down or pull them, it's going to leave a target-rich environment for other invasives. So what's the plans for minimizing new encroachment?
So, this is what I was, saying before about that this doesn't end the effort. What this does is it gets a good jump on it. And so the combination of, diligence and keeping track of where these, new buckthorn that are in the seed bank, where they're popping up, we certainly recognize that until we can establish a reforested town forest with the native plants that we're going to be planting, that we will have to go back and periodically pull the new buckthorn.
Okay, so I'm not getting a sense of a overall vision because you're talking about dealing with buckthorn and then continuing to deal with it with diligence and repeat visits. Presumably at some point, you're going to need to address the tree of heaven, the black swallowwort.
Absolutely. And that's all in the Parterre. Yeah, definitely. And so that, there'll be future requests at town meeting and elsewhere at funding to address those. Like the tree of heaven, there's a lot of them in the compost area, and there's a lot of Japanese knotweed in the compost area. So that we
Around-
recognizing those are all
around the
part of
pond.
the Parterre report that have identified where they are. And, that's kind of the roadmap on what needs to be attacked.
But so there's
And-
not an overall roadmap for how that would approach, because it's gonna cost you how much this time?
This is gonna be about $50,000.
Okay, so then there's gonna be some subset of that for the recurring maintenance. And then there's gonna be additional costs for whatever the next species you tackle.
Correct.
There's garlic mustard, there's all these different things. So what is the overall vision for how you get that money, or you plan to just do one step at a time? Okay, this one we've done something, now you're gonna ask for new money without an overall plan?
So we intend to apply for grants to the extent we can. We've gotten a number of grants from DCR already for the dead tree removal. And we'll continue to apply for grants. And, again, town funding as we can. So that we can, because obviously in the whole Parterre plan, we don't have the money to do it all right now. So all we can, the aggressiveness with which we can attack this problem is certainly, it's money dependent. And, we will use our best efforts to try to get as much funding as we can from the various sources so that we can pursue our goal.
So how likely do you think it is that you do this $50,000 effort and then don't have enough follow-on funding to do the maintenance, to do the next species and the next? I mean, are you just assuming that's gonna work out? Or what
I'm
you-
sorry, Brian, I can hardly hear you.
Okay, I don't usually have a problem with being quiet. So what my question, it just has to do with the bigger plan. You have $50,000 now for this, some amount to do the maintenance. And so are you just thinking you're gonna fund it as you go and just trust that you'll have enough to live out the plan eventually? I just not getting a master vision.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you completely that we need funding to do this plan, to do all of this work. I guess the question at hand is, can we proceed with this first piece
Yeah,
of
and I would
this
say
work,
I'm
and
not-
recognizing that there will be additional work that's going to be needed for the next 10, 20 years.
Yeah, and I will say I'm not real big on approving a first step in anything without some better idea of what step 2, step 3, step 20 is. And so it feels off to me to say, take this step and good luck in the future. It just doesn't seem planned well enough.
We have a plan. I mean, we've got a management plan, which Parterre prepared, that identifies where the species are, what they are. And it's, again, I wish I could tell you that, there was a $1 million, grant out there, which we could use to, handle everything. But there isn't. I mean, that's the reality of it, that we have to, I think we have to do something. I think we have to get a good start. We're lucky we got the ARPA funds, because that was sort of found money in a way. And we want to make sure that if we don't do this project, those funds will be gone.
So my concern.
And then what?
Is founded kind of in the not too distant past, where there were other cutting efforts for the dead trees and what have you. And when you were here for that approval, you said you would use some remaining money to do that replanting. And it's been X amount of time. Now you're talking about planting, but in the meantime, the black swallowwort has come in spades. The trees of heaven have blossomed. It just worries me that you're asking again to approve this and trust us for down the road when that didn't work that well in the past.
Well, we are doing replanting. We've already replanted several areas. We've got some in area 3 done. We did the council ring area. We did south of the council ring. We're going to be doing area 7 in September, and the scouts will be doing area 10 in September or October. So I guess
So
I don't really.
Update on this now. I guess it's clear that I'm a little dubious, but I can stop asking questions at the moment.
Anybody else with questions for Bill? Andrew?
Hey, Bill, thanks for presenting and coming to talk with us about this. I understand where Brian is coming from. It just seems a little piecemeal. But overall, I support what you're trying to do here. And I think it's going to be helpful in the long run. And I do think we should consider expanding our trails permit the next time that comes up to make it easier for you. But my one question was what you had on the screen was, I think it was number 7, the stockpiling. So when you cut all the buckthorn, where do we put all the remainder? I didn't fully understand what the plan is for the brush.
So that can be left on site. And, according to both Parterre and Fish and Wildlife, that's kind of the way it's done. But it has to be done in such a way that it doesn't interfere with, say, the migration of salamanders or other wildlife.
The way it's done here in Massachusetts, I mean, Illinois, they do controlled burns. That's what I'm more familiar with. I'm assuming that's not an option here, but if it is, it's a good way of getting rid of some of the brush and freshening up the soil. But barring that, I'm guessing there's going to be a fair amount of material, right? It's going to potentially get in the way of things. Or is there not as much as it seems?
But it'll be, these trails are kind of diffused, right? They're all around it. And
Yeah.
so things would be pulled and then dropped.
Just at the site.
So they're not going to be just all gathered in one place and just disposed in a big pile. And then they break down.
Okay. Okay.
Anybody else with questions? Chuck?
Yes, raise my hand. Hey, so if you could go back to the I was just going to ask, so as the person that's going to be looking this over, along with the commission too, but it's really my responsibility. That plan that you showed and you're saying, look, I'm going to do the trails and the spurs. Is that highlighted some? I think you might have slipped past that real quickly. And I just wanted to make sure that those were highlighted enough for me to understand where those are outside of the other areas that you propose to treat, but you're not going to get to in phase 2.
Sure. Oops. Okay, what am I saying? Right. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay, so let me get to that slide. Okay. So, I don't have the slide that shows it all together. So you're talking about, Chuck, like these areas that are on the roads?
What are we covering in this request? These roads
This
and
request-
the trails
No,
and spurs?
it's just the trails and spurs. And the
So
reason
only
that-
this plan, okay.
only this part. So all of this, none of this will be included because there's
Okay.
not enough money to do it.
And are we approving that tonight or not? We're just
No.
approving the trails and spurs.
No,
Okay.
the only thing that's in the RDA is this,
Okay.
is the trails and spurs. Now, this is kind of would go back to what we were just talking about with, the townwide trails permit. if you all thought that that would make sense to add invasives control, that we're talking here on town forest wide, then that would simplify the whole process. And if it were just more of a notification as opposed to an RDA. But, again, that's not the subject of tonight so much. It was just more for future consideration. Our goal, of course, is just to get the RDA, just to get this approved so that we get this out to bid.
Sure. And then my next question was, the scouts are taking care of Area 10. I was wondering if they're, so maybe Miles or someone else is going to be out there to make sure they understand how to ID buckthorn.
When I say take care of Area 10, I was talking about the planting.
Oh,
Oops,
okay.
where am I?
Okay. I misunderstood.
There we go. So this slide, so there's really two parts to the RDA. The largest part by far is the invasive plant control. And that's the work that's going to be bid out. What is part of the RDA is just, to include the replanting in areas 7 and 10. So it's area 10 that, and we've had discussions with Walter Kittredge and also with Miles about both of these areas. And so, we'll come up with a plan. I mean, Miles said that, they're going to be doing the steepest slopes of area 7 up near the gas line, just because it is the steepest slope. And so from a funding standpoint, they will handle that because that takes a little bit more effort. That's not something that scouts could necessarily do. The lower part, the flatter part of area 7, that's something that the scouts would do, but following the recommendations of Parterre. I mean, this is kind of what they do. This is their Parterre Ecological. They're certainly experts at what to plant. And we've had discussions with them about the natives that they would recommend, all of which are already in the town forest. So, it should be, that should be fairly easy and fairly straightforward.
And so in the application is Parterre, they add a dye to the formula, either it's glyphosate or whatever else you are suggesting using, so they understand where they've treated before. Is that part of their application method?
That's in past discussions that I've had with them, that is the case. I will confirm, and we can certainly put that requirement in the scope of work.
Okay.
And also, I know I've spoken with them about the signs that they need to put around the applied area that have to be up for a certain number of days after the application.
Yep. Yeah, with all the dogs walking around, it might be a good idea to put some warning signs up there. So it looked like on the plan with the trails and spurs that there was a couple areas very close to wetland areas. And I think we've walked out there a couple of times. And I think that one looks like it's on the causeway. One is an area that probably is pretty close to wetland. What was there, and because glyphosate is a non-selective broad spectrum herbicide, is there any thought of, is there any objection to going with like Garlon 3A or Rodeo for areas close, real close, like within 10 feet of the wetland, or any areas that may actually be near wetland areas that you have that inch stalk that you cut and dab?
They recommended the triclopyr over the glyphosate just because it's more effective on woody plants. I mean, I could ask it. The glyphosate would certainly do something. Whether it'll be as effective, that I don't know, but I can ask them.
Yeah, I think I would be interested in the methodology of picking what goes where, and triclopyr, I've heard of that before. We've used it, or at least I've approved it before. But is there a difference, or are they trying to pick one herbicide that will do everything, or will they split it up into sensitive areas and, upland areas?
Their recommendation was just the triclopyr for all buckthorn because it is the most effective of the herbicides. But I can ask them if they have come across this and what their recommendation would be for if we were, say, within 10 feet of a wetland. If see what they come back with. And if they do
Okay.
come back, if they say, yeah, that when we're getting that close to a wetland, we can certainly switch to glyphosate. The only thing is, it'll somewhat complicate because this is again going out to bid, and so it maybe somebody else other than Parterre could get the contract. And so if we then put it on the applicator to make the call on where the wetlands are, that would complicate things.
Well, I think that's important to understand where the more sensitive areas are on the property, and to have them highlighted, noted on a plan, and to also have a note saying that, glyphosate is not allowed in this area. It has to be, whatever. Even I would like to look up triclopyr and find out what that if that can be used in the area, and maybe it can. But I know that the Garlon and the rodeo have been used in the past in sensitive areas.
Okay. And that's glyphosate, Garlon and
No.
rodeo?
No, they're not. That's totally different. They're just a different product. So glyphosate is probably everywhere else, upland, but in close proximity to the wetland area. This is when we would, rodeo or Garlon. It's like Garlon 3A. And I'll try to look into. I do remember seeing something about that. I'll look into it when someone else is talking.
Chuck,
Sure.
this is Tony. I was looking at MSDS's yesterday just to confirm, and rodeo, I believe, has a much higher concentration of glyphosate than does Roundup. In my understanding of the herbicide that's been proposed, it's a little more selective, where at the prescribed application rates, it doesn't affect sedges and grasses.
Well, the two I mentioned have been approved for wetland sites. So even if it
So
has
this
a
says
higher
the active, this says the
Yeah.
active ingredients is triclopyr in Garlon 3A.
Yeah, well, then maybe that's then maybe they are using that Garlon.
Yeah.
All right, well, that answers that question.
Any other questions from you, Chuck?
Yeah, I just, the only other one I had written down is something that Brian brought up, and so maybe we would consider a condition that if rain's in the forecast within 72 hours, you wouldn't apply any herbicide. Does that sound reasonable?
I'm going to suggest you check the manufacturer's labels on the herbicides to find out what they recommend for distance away from possible rain. If they soak in or break down sooner than that, that's pretty limiting to go out 72 hours.
That's a good point, Martha. Yeah, and that's one of the requirements already in the scope of work, is that they have to follow the manufacturer's recommendations, but we could certainly clarify that they must abide by whatever weather conditions there are in the manufacturer's label.
I don't mean to totally undercut Chuck. So, if If
Well-
we're looking for a specific number of days or hours, that would be good to put that in writing, but I think we should start by looking at the recommendations from somebody other than this commission for how much time you need to let it sit before it rains.
That's a good point. That's sometimes it's hard to predict in, September, October, when, how much rain, so it gets a little bit difficult for us to.
The
define it.
only reason that I threw out a number, and I think that 72 hours is reasonable myself, but the applicant wants to finish up tonight. So this research, this back and forth is not exactly what we're going to get with this application if the applicant wants to have this closed tonight. So keep
But I
that,
think though, Chuck,
keep that in mind.
but if we could, go on the premise that they must comply with the manufacturer's requirements with respect to rainfall, doesn't that achieve what is a very reasonable requirement?
Again, I would love to have the data sheet on Triclopyr and read it myself, but sure, I'm hoping it's mentioned in there.
The reason I was concerned about 72 hours is because I was trying to do some painting of a garden shed this July. And I kept looking for a window of opportunity when it had not rained yesterday and was not predicted to rain today or tomorrow, which would be your 72-hour window. And I never got one the entire month of July until well, I guess it was part of June and most of July, but I finally got my window. So I'm thinking that if you make it no rain forecast for 72 hours, they may discover that they can't do this herbicide application at all. Whereas if you said 48 hours or 24 hours, they might be able to accomplish this project. So that's all.
And if the manufacturer is saying that I don't know what the number is, but say they say that, with all their research, that 24 hours is enough. If that were the case, and we made it particularly onerous, that would then perhaps make this not feasible to be done this fall for no particular reason, if 24 is enough time, or whatever the time it really is.
Yeah, I mean, I think both those answers seem to be more about the project than what's best for the environment. But I think that without having the information in front of me, I would say what Bill came up with sounds reasonable if there is a moratorium on applications during a certain period before any rainstorm. That would be the best way to approach it, I guess.
Before and after, yes. Okay, that's good.
Bill's
Yeah,
had
we
his
can definitely-
hand up a long time. So let's give Bill a chance.
Yep. So Bill, I just wanted to, first of all, thank you for all the work on this. I'm sure we're all very big fans of this forest and the resource it represents for Reading. I just want to make sure that I got this right from earlier discussion, particularly with Brian. You've talked about there's an overall plan. This is part of the plan. I just want to confirm you're spending all available funding to complete this part of the plan. That is, there's other parts of a larger plan that you don't have funding for. So you are pragmatically spending what you have. Do I have that right?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
And so what
That's-
we tried to do is for the money that we have left,
Mhm.
we looked at what could we accomplish for that money? And it
Mhm.
just happens to line up based on Parterre's estimate on the number of hours that it would take to do this
Mhm.
work under what we're calling phase 2, which is the trails and spurs, lines up nicely with the amount of money we have left.
Okay, that's helpful. And then the second thing, this is really more of a comment. you've already, you've talked about the general trail permit, and you've said, realize that's not before us tonight, and that is correct. But I just want to say, we have several newer members to the commission, including myself. As of next month, will have been on the commission 6 months. So there's several of us that would want to see the trail permit and really think it through, particularly in light of the kinds of concerns that Brian raised. So that's just to manage expectations. It's not about what's currently before us, but I just wanted to be clear that, we're going to want to take a close and careful look at that, because we don't have the institutional history with it, and we want to deliberate. And I know all town committees have turnover and so forth, but I just wanted to remark on that, and that's it. Thank you.
Absolutely. No, that's understood. That's, we'll at another time perhaps come back and talk about the overall trail permit, but that's not for tonight.
Chuck, you have your hand up again? You're muted.
To add to the trail permit discussion, so for conservation, when you modify a permit, it is the full process again. That's what you'd have to do. I don't think I would recommend adding herbicide applications to the trail permit, because the trail committee uses it, and so do other people. It's a townwide trail permit, so not only people that are in the know could use it, but homeowners also. So it's almost giving carte blanche to applying herbicide on a trail and big volumes like we're talking about here. I mean, that's what you want us to approve. So I think
No.
I would be opposed to it because it's such a large area. I mean,
there's a requirement that only certified applicators can do this, the cut and dab. That's all we're looking for. That's all the scope of work is it will specify that they must be licensed applicators. So, and again, this is for another day, but you could certainly get around your concern, Chuck. I think if we said, if you all thought it was a good idea to put this in the townwide trails permit, that it already makes reference to invasives control, but it doesn't specifically identify the herbicide application. What could be added would be, herbicide application would be allowed, but only by a licensed applicator. And that would kind of, I think, address your concern, Chuck.
okay. Not okay, it will address my concern, but okay, thank you for that information. How's that?
Okay, that's fine. That's for another day.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so I have a couple of comments of my own. It looks like from page 10 of the RDA application, where they're talking about the cost breakdown from Parterre. It mentions foliar herbicide application and using triclopyr based herbicide, parentheses, trade name Garlon 3A. And also when we had a application from Camp Curtis Guild, 5-year invasive plant management, they mentioned using only wetland approved herbicides such as Garlon 3A or Rodeo will be used. So it looks like Garlon 3A is approved for use near wetlands. So that was a question that was brought up. But I'm also looking where it talks about foliar herbicide application. In your PowerPoint, you didn't mention that, you just mentioned cut and dabbing on the cut stems. So will there be no leaf spraying in this particular phase of the project?
No, it's the spec will be very clear that there's only cut and dab on the larger stems.
Okay, so other plants that might need leaf spraying will be either Japanese knotweed or something else that won't be tackled in this particular project. Okay,
The Japanese knotweed has very different application windows that the first step has to be done around Memorial Day. And then the second step is around Labor Day. So and that will take, they say that it would take about, you get about between 70 to 80% mortality the first year, but then you have to keep coming back because, as I'm sure you all know, the Japanese knotweed is very, very difficult to eliminate.
okay. Well, so that answers a lot of my questions. I have one other question in the Camp Curtis Guild proposal. They were very specific about avoiding pulling plants near vernal pools, and especially during juvenile amphibian migration, which I guess that won't be a problem if you're doing it in September. But also they talked about not pulling vegetation that would result in stream bank destabilization. Are any of your areas you're proposing along the trails involved in streams where we would want to be careful not to pull up plants that are stabilizing the stream banks?
Of all the trails really don't go through stream banks. They're, they might be, not terribly far from them, but I don't think we're not trying to tackle, like, I know that there are some areas down by Cranberry Dam where there's a ton of Japanese knotweed, and it's right there. It's right in the wetland.
That's Japanese knotweed or buckthorn now?
I'm sorry, buckthorn. There's
Okay.
buckthorn there. That's not, so we're not going to be handling that right now.
Okay. Can you put your map back up again?
Sure.
So we're looking for the page with the spurs and trails. Yeah. Okay. If you look at the trail coming in from Lynn Village Way, I know there
Yes.
is a place there where there's a bridge across a stream.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing I'm concerned with.
Oh,
That
yeah,
It
no,
does look
fair-
like it's listed as light invasive pressure along there.
Right.
So I would just, want to see some language like that was in the other one. It said, no vegetation will be removed that would result in stream bank destabilization or disturbance. If invasive plants are encountered within banks, non-ground disturbing management techniques will be employed to treat these plants, such as herbicide, cut, and paint.
Okay.
So, that might be a place where we would make an exception to the 1-inch rule if by pulling those plants, we're going to be ripping the banks apart. Do anybody else on the commission feel that that's a valid thing to be careful of?
Seems valid. Yeah.
I agree.
And what about Chuck?
Yeah, I think I just find it hard to say yes when I haven't seen it, but it sounds like it's reasonable. Let me say that.
I'm just going from, this other project that we approved where it seemed like that was very carefully thought out. That was one place that I thought might make sense to copy their project.
Again, I think this is, a question that to just highlight this area and say, we have a concern about this area. It'd be great to talk to the applicator. If it was Miles, we could just shoot him an email and say, how are you going to handle this? Because he has a lot of experience and maybe, he thinks it's fine to pull these out in that area, or it's a great suggestion and he never thought about it. But I'm not sure. So I'm just weighing the damage to the bank with spraying or possible problems of dropping this product in the water.
Mhm. Right. That makes sense.
Although it does say that it's slightly toxic. It's not so it's non-toxic to mammals, insects, freshwater fish, and invertebrate. So, it's a good choice. It's slightly toxic to birds. So,
There's no spraying, right? It's just dabbing.
dabbing, yeah.
So the risk would be somebody dropping their bucket of herbicide by accident and spilling out of it. And there is a risk of that. We would want people to be careful.
Well, it's more than that, but
Well, it's not in a bucket. It's in a bottle, and it's got like a sponge top,
Ah, like a bingo dauber.
something like that.
Okay,
And so they shouldn't be filling it up standing in the water.
okay.
I mean, yeah, I'm less concerned about a professional company going in there and doing that, because I think they've practiced. I've talked to Miles a lot of times. He really, and his crews are great. I met them out in Millette, Soms, and Morgan, and they know what they're doing. Miles does too, but he's not out there doing the work. The crews are, and those guys really knew what they were doing. So I guess it would be great to talk to whoever gets the contract about this area, but it's another good suggestion. I just don't know what's the best way to go with it.
Okay. All right.
I would just say to that because, we would be dealing with this contractor, I can't imagine that there's much cost differential between treating by pulling versus, cut and dab of smaller plants. So, they're, contractors that I've dealt with, for the most part, if it doesn't cost them more money to do something, they'll help the client. So I suspect that would be the case. That would be if Parterre doesn't get it. Of course, if Parterre gets it, then it's a simple matter.
Okay. All right. Are there any other members of the commission with questions, concerns, modifications to this project that we need to address? And I don't see any members of the general public at this hearing. How about Chris Cole and Jane Kinsella? Do either of you have any comments?
Nope, no comment. Thank you, though.
No, we're all set. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Do we have any further discussion we need, or can we make a motion tonight?
So we should close discussion, discuss conditions, and then issue, if that's how it goes.
Okay. Do members of the commission feel ready to have a motion to close? If so, can somebody make that motion?
Brian, I heard your concerns. Are you satisfied with moving forward?
I'm satisfied with going to a vote.
Okay, this is Andrew Gibet. I'll make a motion to close the public hearing for the invasive control at Town Forest.
This is Tony Rotalakis. I second that.
Brian Bowe in favor.
Andrew Gibet in favor.
Bill McCants in favor.
Walter Talbot in favor.
Tony Rotalakis in favor.
Martha Moore in favor. Okay, 600 to close. Okay, and what conditions do we need to have for this project?
So I'll just read what I have. So dye will be mixed in with the herbicide, so they can track where it's being applied. And we've already talked about the wetland area and we talked about Garland. So that's what they're using anyways. So in this contract, we would only condition triclopyr or rodeo because it seemed like they're using triclopyr and rodeo is the other one that's okay. And then I had this rain condition, but I was able to look at the fact sheet and I could say 24 hours safely because they think once it's dry, it's fine. So if the commission would agree to 24 hours, if rain was in the forecast within 24 hours, then they can't apply.
Yes,
Was that
I saw that too, Chuck. Yeah.
okay?
I'm happy with that.
Sure.
Those are the conditions I have. Now, did I miss anything from the discussion, commission members?
You want to
Yeah,
add, oh,
Chuck-
sorry.
So go ahead.
Martha's, I like that suggestion that from Camp Curtis Guild about, don't pull vegetation that can cause stream bank.
Yeah, I'd like to see that in there. Or at least have a pre-work meeting with Chuck to look at the stream banks and make a decision with Chuck's, in consultation with Chuck.
Yeah. So that would be so don't pull the vegetation on the stream bank, and this would be treated instead, and or consultation or pre-activity meeting. That would be part of this contract anyways, right? I would assume that we're all walking out there prior to starting.
Absolutely.
I'm seeing Bill shaking his head, but I was looking for Chris and Jane to shake their head also. There's a pre-activity meeting. Okay. Yeah, so that would be fine.
Okay. And what about Andrew's suggestion, or was it Tony's suggestion? I forget now, about cutting the diameter down. So you're doing more cut and dab and less pulling.
Tony.
Do we have any thoughts?
Yeah, so
on
we
that?
could say I think Bill thought that was interesting, but we could just put it a condition that allowed cut and dab of up to a half inch from a half inch up in diameter.
Well, I don't know if we have to put it in as a condition. That's maybe something that they could talk about during the procurement process and the scoping process.
So what
I
would that look like?
Prefer that only because there may be a very sound scientific reason why they use the 1 inch. And if there could be some latitude, I like the idea about this pre-activity meeting. And if it, and again, I'm not sure that there's that much of a difference in the level of effort to cut and dab a half inch versus pulling a half inch. I'm not sure that it would make that much of a difference for him.
Well, to have the size right, I'm just thinking that I need to write the order. And so to try to figure out ways to get what you want without actually getting the answer. So that's why I gave a range.
The only thing is we don't know that, and no offense to the suggestion, but there may be a reason why we don't want a half inch. And I don't know what that is.
Well, it doesn't
Miles
restrict,
would know.
it just gives them the option to dab a half inch stock if they wanted to. If so they can dab from a half inch, up to whatever, 2 inches or something like that, because we were only dabbing an inch over. And then Tony made a suggestion about dabbing smaller plants because it would kill off the roots and there would be less, less saplings growing from them, from whatever the root. I'm not sure if it grows like that though.
And we're okay with that as a commission? I mean, I think part of the idea is 1 inch or more, so you're minimizing the amount of herbicide being used.
Yeah, no, we're just discussing this condition right now. I was just bringing it up. It was Tony's suggestion.
Well, it was more of a question than a suggestion. If there's a way to optimize the return that we're getting on this project, on the labor and on the resources, I don't know that we necessarily need to put a condition in there. other than that that the herbicide is applied according to manufacturer's recommendations and specifications. And if that includes, effective use on smaller diameter stalks, that would give us the flexibility.
So we're eliminating altogether the 1 inch, what was in that first slide where it was 1 inch and above?
Well, was that what was recommended by Parterre, is the 1 inch and above? When they made their presentation, they were saying pull below 1 inch, cut and dab above 1 inch. So I guess my inclination would be we paid them good money for their expertise, and maybe we should listen to their expertise and put into the bid application, the bid documents, what was recommended by them. Does that make sense? Chuck, you're muted. Do you have a thought on that?
It made sense to me because some part of Parterre's language would be part of the permit. Just, I would have, Tony, I would have written that in because someone mentioned it in the meeting that they're going to dab 1 inch and above and pull out if it's less than 1 inch. So I was just trying to, so we could eliminate that whole thing and just say by manufacturer's recommendations. But I didn't, so I looked at the fact sheet on triclopyr from the EPA, and then I looked at the product Garlon, and it didn't give a size. So that might not be in there.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to suggest that we keep in whatever language was in the Parterre document that that we're basing this whole application on, and have that go in the bid documents.
All right. All right.
If anybody on the commission objects to that, speak up.
No, I'm comfortable with it. I'm sure doing a 1/2 inch would do more damage, but that's part of the reason why I hesitate and trust the ecologists.
Do more damage, yeah.
Okay, so conditions are dye mixed with herbicide, use Garlon 3 or Rodeo because they're okay for use in wetlands. 24-hour, no rain should be in the forecast after applying this, and pre-activity meeting with Chuck to discuss any stream bank vegetation treatment, what would be the preferred method.
Sure. And then the one we didn't get to was the optimal time for treatment for these priority management areas would be September 15th and beyond. It sounded like that's what you were shooting for, or were you trying to get into August? We're in August now, but you said 3 weeks, so
Yeah.
probably in September.
Correct.
So September 15th is a reasonable.
Well, the goal would be to get it out to bid and award it as soon as possible. So I don't realistically, we're not going to get there. Today's the 9th. Say we could, say it takes, say 3-4 weeks, say 3 weeks to get the bid, because it has to be on the street 2 weeks. Jane, you can speak to that better than I.
Well, it's a chart of priority management areas, 100-foot buffer zone and vernal pool and wetlands. And the recommendation is that buckthorn is pulled after September 5th or treated after September 15th. And it sounds like you're pretty much in that zone anyways.
Okay.
This is
Where
still.
are you reading that, Chuck?
This is a document that was prepared by VSC for the Camp Curtis Guild invasive management plan.
Mm. Yeah, but you're right. That's the reality.
I can put
That's
it on
what,
the screen if you
we-
want to look at it. Let me see what I can do here.
We're in that time frame anyway, Bill.
Yeah, it sounded like you were in that time frame
That's
anyways.
right. Yep.
Yeah.
So we're good. No, we're good, Chuck.
Yeah, here we are right here, Buckthorn, and there's September 15th, all blue. Blue is treatment window.
Right.
Okay.
So treatment window is December 15th through January. I mean, September 15th through January.
Yeah, and this is just this is not a very long project. I don't know if it's a week or 2 weeks, but it's not.
Mhm. Yeah.
Those are the notes I took, and I grabbed the rest.
Actually,
It-
Chuck, I have one other question. We talked about not treating during rain, not treating 24 hours ahead of time. Does it matter how long after a rain before they treat? I haven't read anything about it, but I don't know if you would know anything.
Yeah, so it's supposed to be applied to a dry plant if that's what they're doing. And I think with cutting it, if you're cutting it, it's going to be protected. The inside's going to be protected from the rain anyways. So I think you could go out, and they probably wouldn't go right out after the rain, but if it rained the day before, they could go out and it would still be kind of misty in that area. That's my thought, but you could say 24 hours after also, if you felt like it, which is now we're
I
into,
guess I just as soon leave that under the coverage of following the manufacturer's directions.
sure. Yeah, so we'll just leave the one.
Okay. All right. So
And Chuck, I had asked that a plant specialist just walk over the project area, the work area before any work's done, just to confirm that there are no rare, threatened, or endangered plants or other
No,
sensitive
that's
plants
something-
that could be avoided.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Jane, if that could be, if we would include that in this bid document, or whether we would try to do that, almost like as the owner, you know what I mean? Because, we're hiring these people to deal with the buckthorn, to pull it and to
Right,
treat
a
it.
certain task. I think that has to be outside of this bid.
Yeah.
Bill, isn't there somebody who has walked the town forest with us who really is a plant specialist? I'm thinking it's somebody who was at Harvard and has recently retired,
Walter,
maybe.
Walter Kittredge, yeah, if he may be,
So maybe if he was willing to come out as a volunteer,
sure,
he-
he's been
he
very
might-
helpful,
He might satisfy Tony's concerns.
sure, absolutely.
It's still a condition, but you don't have to put it in the bid documents if Walter's going to do it, if that's acceptable to Tony.
That's fine.
Great.
Okay. All right, so we closed, we've discussed conditions. Are we ready for a motion to, if they're gonna do this, they need a negative RDA,
Hmm.
right?
That's right.
Don't all jump at once.
So we wouldn't be approving the wetland line. That would be one I check off. So like +2 and negative N3 or N3 would probably work because this is all buffer zone.
We didn't discuss the planting either. Is that gonna be part of this?
And what was the question?
The replanting, the planting that you're doing. when is that taking place?
So that'll be the first, that, you're right, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, that would be that's part of the RDA. Not part of what's being bid, coming up, but we have Parterre under contract for Area 7 to plant that. And then again, the Scouts will plant Area 10 in the fall, so.
Do you have a plan what species you're going to be putting into each of those areas?
We're gonna be, Parterre is preparing that. In fact, a matter of fact, I believe that might even be in the report. Chris, you might,
There was that estimate.
that's the purchase order with Parterre, or the scope from it is part of the RDA. So that will cover Area 7, the upper portion of Area 7.
Page 10 of the RDA.
Ah, right. That's the slope stabilization planting and slope stabilization seeding. Includes black chokeberry, Baptisia tinctoria, sweet fern, black huckleberry, pitch pine, scrub oak, butterfly milkweed, partridge pea, little blue stem, hairy beard tongue, and wild lupine. Okay, yeah, so they've got all the plants listed that we're approving
For area
for
7.
the planting.
How about for area 10?
Is this,
We don't have that.
is this what you were
that
talking
plan
about?
yet.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, that's the page. So we don't have an area 10 plant list yet?
Right.
Okay, so maybe one condition should be that before they plant area 10, they come back to us with a finalized plant list for area 10.
Sure. Not with a new RDA though, right? Just to submit the list of plants.
Well, so yeah, you could just submit it, or the commission could add to it to review and approve. So whichever you want. If it can just be submitted, Martha, or do you want it to be reviewed and approved?
I'd like it reviewed and approved. So basically that doesn't mean we're creating a whole new RDA, but before they do the planting in area 10, we'd like to have the commission have a chance to look over your list of plants that you're planning to put there and
Sure.
make, approve or modify your list as we feel appropriate at the time.
We put a
That's
deadline
fine.
for the planting list? Is that something we want in the next month or the next 2 months?
When are you
Well, yeah,
planning
'cause
to do that
it's-
planting?
Yeah, it's I believe it's October.
Okay, so we'd want that planting list by the first meeting in September. So that if we have changes to make, you can bring it back to us at the second meeting in September.
So September 13th.
Right,
Okay, I'll see what I can come up with.
great. Okay. Thank you for mentioning those conditions about the replanting. That was important to get that into this RDA list of conditions. Are we ready for a motion to, for negative determination? If that's what we want to move, or does somebody want to move otherwise? We need somebody on here to speak up.
Yeah, I will make a motion for negative determination for the town forest RDA under the conditions discussed. But I will comment that per Brian's concerns, it would be easier if you had a bigger plan for us to work with in the future.
This is
It's
Tony
Bill McCann.
Rotalakis. Go ahead, Bill.
It's Bill McCants. I'll second the motion.
This is Brian Bowe. I vote no, not in favor.
Andrew Dribbin in favor.
Bill McCants in favor.
Walter Talbot in favor.
Tony Rotalakis in favor.
Martha Moore in favor. So we have 5 in favor, Brian voting no, and nobody abstaining. Are we all set?
One more question, Chris or Jane or Bill, when do you need this to go out in the bid? And I do have some I'm doing now, so it can't be, you know, I just want to know a time frame of when you need this. So we have 21 days to issue. Could I take all 21 days? Do you need it next week? When do you need this document?
Well, if you took all 21 days, we're not gonna,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, if you could have it next week, Chuck, I mean, that'll be the best case.
By the end of next week?
Yeah.
Could that work?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think Wednesday of next week is something I can shoot for and probably get done. Okay.
That would be
All right.
great, Chuck. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
And thank you all very much.
All right, Bill. Yeah, great
Thanks.
presentation. Thanks everyone for coming in. All right, so our short meeting is now 9:30 or 10:30. Yeah. So, and Bill's got to go back to the bylaw committee to fill the rest
Sure,
of the
they're long
night up.
gone by now.
So,
Are we all set? Can I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Thank
Second.
you again.
Motion to adjourn.
Brian adjourn. Anybody second?
I'll second
Tony
that.
seconds.
Andrew seconded, and all in favor, raise your hands. All right, thank you very much.
unanimous. Yep. Thank you. Bye now.
Right.
And